Picture this, a prophecy carved into stone, foretelling the rise of a hero destined to battle a serpent so vast it encircles the world, or a single, shimmering artifact, pulsing with a power so ancient it could rewrite reality itself. These aren't just fleeting ideas, they are the very heartbeat of our oldest and most powerful stories. For thousands of years, across every culture and continent, humanity has been captivated by tales of myth and magic. These stories were our first blockbusters, told around flickering fires under vast, starry skies, passed down through generations, shaping our understanding of the world, our fears, and our greatest hopes. They are the foundational blocks of everything we love about storytelling today, the original templates for the epic journeys and cosmic battles that still thrill us on the big screen. And the most incredible part, these sagas are far more than mere fiction. They are the deeply encoded wisdom, dreams, and nightmares of our ancestors, a colossal inheritance waiting to be rediscovered. So today, we are embarking on an unprecedented journey to explore 25 of the most epic, world-shaping tales ever conceived. We will travel from the frost-bitten realms of the Norse, where gods trade an eye for wisdom and the sound of a great horn signals the end of all things, to the sun-baked deserts of Egypt, where the sun god sails his bark through the perils of the underworld every single night. We will stand alongside heroes who defy impossible odds, confront monsters born from the darkest corners of the imagination, and witness the raw, untamed magic that binds the cosmos together. This is not a dry history lesson. This is an invitation to feel the awe and wonder that our ancestors felt, to connect with a part of our shared human spirit that has always reached for the stars, wrestled with gods, and dared to imagine the impossible. So settle in and get ready, because we are about to dive deep into the legends that built our world, uncovering the timeless truths and spectacular adventures hidden within 25 epic sagas of myth and magic. Our journey begins not with gleaming mythic Greece or the kingdoms of the Norse, but in the dust and heat of ancient Mesopotamia, over 4,000 years ago, with a story so foundational it's considered the very first great epic ever written down, the Epic of Gilgamesh. Think about that for a moment. This story was already ancient when Homer was composing his works, when the pyramids were still young. It was etched into clay tablets in a script called cuneiform, a language lost for millennia and only rediscovered by modern archaeologists in the ruins of Assyrian libraries. The tale centers on Gilgamesh, the king of the city of Uruk, but he is no ordinary ruler. He is 2/3 god and 1/3 man, a being of immense power and energy. And he is a tyrant, using his strength to oppress his own people, leaving them exhausted and desperate for relief. In response to their pleas, the gods create a counterpart for him, a wild man named Enkidu. Enkidu is nature itself given human form, living among the animals, untouched by civilization. The story of their first confrontation, a colossal wrestling match that shakes the very ground, is one of the most powerful depictions of a first meeting in all of literature. Instead of destroying each other, they find a profound, soul-deep respect, and from that violent beginning blossoms an unbreakable friendship that transforms them both. Gilgamesh is calmed, ennobled by this bond, and Enkidu is introduced to the world of humanity. Together, they embark on a grand adventure to the fabled cedar forest, a place forbidden to mortals, guarded by a fearsome monster named Humbaba. This creature, described as a being of terrifying visage with the roar of a flood and breath of fire, represents primordial chaos, the untamed wild that civilization must constantly push back against. Their victory over Humbaba is a triumphant moment, but it's also a transgression, an act that angers the gods. And this is where the epic pivots from a simple adventure tale to a deep, philosophical exploration of what it means to be human. As punishment, the gods decree that Enkidu must die. His subsequent illness and death is one of the most heart-wrenching sequences in ancient literature. Gilgamesh is utterly shattered, confronted for the first time with the cold, impersonal reality of death. He mourns by his friend's body for 7 days and nights, refusing to let him be buried until a maggot falls from the corpse. This grotesque, visceral detail finally forces Gilgamesh to accept the truth. His grief propels him on a new, desperate quest, no longer for glory, but for the one thing his divine power cannot grant him: eternal life. He abandons his kingdom, dons animal skins, and wanders the ends of the earth in search of Utnapishtim, the Mesopotamian counterpart to the biblical Noah. This man and his wife were the only mortals granted immortality by the gods after surviving the great flood that wiped out humanity. Gilgamesh's journey to find him is a harrowing trek through darkness and peril, symbolizing his own internal descent into despair and his frantic search for meaning. When he finally finds the ancient sage, Utnapishtim poses a simple, devastating challenge to test Gilgamesh's worthiness for immortality: stay awake for 6 days and 7 nights. Exhausted by his journey, Gilgamesh fails immediately, falling asleep. It's a profound metaphor. He cannot even conquer sleep, the little brother of death, so how can he hope to conquer death itself? In a final act of pity, Utnapishtim's wife convinces her husband to tell Gilgamesh of a plant that grows at the bottom of the ocean, a plant that can restore a man's youth. Gilgamesh dives deep, retrieves the thorny plant, and begins his journey home, filled with a new, fragile hope. But in a moment of cruelest irony, while he stops to bathe in a pool of fresh water, a serpent slithers up and steals the plant, immediately shedding its skin and rejuvenating itself. Gilgamesh is left sitting on the shore, weeping. He has nothing. He has faced monsters, crossed oceans, and spoken with immortal flood survivors, only to be defeated by a simple snake. He returns to the walls of his great city, Uruk, a changed man. The epic ends not with a grand victory or a magical solution, but with Gilgamesh showing a visiting traveler the mighty, imposing walls of his city. His legacy, he realizes, will not be his own unending life, but what he built for his people. It is a quiet, powerful, and deeply human conclusion. His quest for physical immortality failed, but in accepting his mortality, he achieves a different kind of eternity, the enduring memory of his city and his deeds. The epic of Gilgamesh resonates so powerfully today because it tackles the very questions we still grapple with: the nature of friendship, the soul-crushing pain of loss, the fear of death, and the search for a meaningful legacy in a world that is ultimately temporary. It is the story of a man who was part god learning how to be fully, completely human. From the sun-baked plains of Mesopotamia, we now voyage east to the ancient, mystical land of India, where we encounter a story of such staggering scale and philosophical depth that it makes most other epics seem like brief anecdotes. This is the Mahabharata. To call it a long poem is like calling the ocean a puddle. It is a universe of story, a sprawling tapestry of myth, history, and cosmic lore that is roughly 10 times the length of the Iliad and Odyssey combined. At its heart, the Mahabharata is the account of a catastrophic war, a devastating family feud between 2 sets of cousins, the virtuous Pandavas and the power-hungry Kauravas, for the throne of the kingdom of Hastinapura. But this is merely the stage. The epic uses this conflict as a lens to examine every facet of human existence: duty, honor, righteousness, desire, and the very nature of reality. The characters are not simple heroes and villains. They are complex, flawed individuals making impossible choices in a world where right and wrong are often shrouded in gray. The Kauravas, led by the ambitious Duryodhana, are not mustache-twirling evil. They are consumed by envy and a twisted sense of entitlement. The Pandavas, champions of justice, are also far from perfect. They gamble away their wife in a rigged dice game. They tell lies on the battlefield, and they are pushed to the brink of their own moral codes. This intricate web of conflicting duties, or dharma, is where the story finds its profound power. The entire cosmic conflict culminates on the field of Kurukshetra. Armies numbering in the millions stand arrayed against each other, but the epic's most pivotal moment does not involve a sword or a spear. It happens in the quiet space between the two armies as the great archer Arjuna, one of the Pandava brothers, looks across the battlefield and sees his teachers, his uncles, his cousins, and his friends. Overwhelmed by grief and moral confusion, he lays down his bow. How can he fight a war that will lead to the death of his own kin? How can any victory be worth such a price? This moment of existential crisis brings us to the very soul of the Mahabharata, and indeed to one of the most important spiritual texts ever composed, the Bhagavad Gita. As Arjuna refuses to fight, his charioteer, who is none other than the god Lord Krishna in human form, begins to speak. What follows is not a simple pep talk, but a comprehensive philosophical discourse on the nature of the soul, action, and duty. Krishna elucidates the concept of dharma, one's sacred duty based on one's station in life. For a warrior, he explains, there is no greater duty than to fight for a righteous cause. He introduces the idea of karma, emphasizing that one must perform one's duty without attachment to the fruits of the action. You have a right to perform your prescribed duties, he says, but you are not entitled to the fruits of your actions. This teaching seeks to resolve the tension between action and renunciation, guiding Arjuna towards selfless service. Furthermore, Krishna reveals his sublime, universal form, a terrifying, magnificent vision of all the gods, all of time, and the entire cosmos contained within his body, to show Arjuna that he is merely an instrument in a much larger divine play. This revelation shatters Arjuna's limited perspective, replacing his despair with a sense of awe and a renewed commitment to his role in the cosmic order. With his clarity restored, Arjuna picks up his bow and the war begins. The ensuing battle is a spectacle of divine and demonic forces. Celestial weapons known as astras are unleashed, capable of leveling mountains and boiling oceans. Gods and sages watch from the heavens, occasionally intervening directly. The narrative is filled with episodes of incredible heroism, heartbreaking betrayal, and profound sacrifice. Characters are forced to make difficult choices, and even the right decisions often have tragic, unforeseen consequences, exploring the idea that the path of dharma is subtle and often difficult to discern. The Mahabharata holds a mirror to the human condition, presenting a world where the lines between good and evil are blurred, where even the most righteous path is fraught with moral compromise, and where the ultimate victory is often bittersweet. It teaches that life itself is a battlefield, and each of us, like Arjuna, must confront our own moments of doubt and confusion, seeking the inner wisdom to perform our duty with courage, detachment, and a heart dedicated to a higher purpose. While the Mahabharata presents a complex world of moral gray areas, the Ramayana offers a radiant, crystalline vision of ideal conduct, a story where the lines between right and wrong are sharply drawn and the hero is the very embodiment of virtue. If the Mahabharata is a philosophical treatise on a cosmic battlefield, the Ramayana is a luminous epic poem that defines the perfect king, the perfect wife, the perfect brother, and the perfect devotee. It is the story of Prince Rama, the heir to the kingdom of Kosala, who is beloved by all for his unwavering commitment to dharma or righteousness. On the eve of his coronation, a cruel twist of fate, orchestrated by one of his father's wives, forces him into 14 years of exile in the wild, dangerous forests. Without a moment of hesitation or a word of complaint, Rama accepts his fate, stating that his father's promise must be upheld, even at the cost of his own throne. This selfless act sets the tone for the entire epic. Rama's life is a testament to placing duty above personal desire. He is accompanied into exile by his profoundly loyal wife, Sita, and his devoted brother, Lakshmana. Sita, the daughter of the earth, is not a passive figure to be rescued. Her decision to follow her husband into hardship is an act of immense courage and devotion, a choice that defines her own powerful character. Their life in the forest is peaceful for a time, a pastoral idyll surrounded by nature. But this peace is shattered by the arrival of Surpanaka, a demoness sister of the mighty king of Lanka, the 10-headed Ravana. When Rama and Lakshmana repel her advances, her wounded pride ignites a cataclysm. She returns to her brother's island fortress of Lanka and describes Sita's unparalleled beauty, convincing Ravana that he must possess her. Ravana, a being of immense power, a great scholar and a devout worshipper of Shiva, is undone by his own insatiable ego and desire. He hatches a cunning plan, using a magical golden deer to lure Rama and Lakshmana away from their humble hut, leaving Sita unprotected. Disguising himself as a humble holy man, Ravana crosses the protective boundary of the dwelling, abducts Sita, and carries her away in his flying chariot, the Pushpaka Vimana, towards his golden city across the sea. The image of Sita desperately dropping her jewels to the ground for Rama to find is one of the most poignant and heartbreaking moments in the epic. When Rama and Lakshmana return to find the hut empty, Rama's composure shatters for the first and only time. His grief is a raw, human counterpoint to his usual divine calm, revealing the depth of his love for Sita. Their desperate search leads them south to the kingdom of Kishkinda, where they meet Sugriva, the exiled monkey king, and his most devoted and powerful general, Hanuman. Hanuman, the son of the wind god, is a character of unparalleled energy and devotion. He is not just a powerful warrior, he is the ultimate devotee, his every thought, word, and action dedicated to the service of Lord Rama. It is Hanuman who makes the legendary leap across the ocean to the island of Lanka, growing to a colossal size to traverse the vast expanse of water. Upon arriving, he shrinks himself to the size of a cat to explore the opulent, fortified city, a breathtaking metropolis of gold and jewels that gleams under the sun. He finally finds Sita in a grove of Ashoka trees where she is being held captive, steadfastly resisting Ravana's threats and promises. To prove his identity, Hanuman gives her Rama's signet ring, and in return, Sita gives him her hairpin. Before leaving, Hanuman allows himself to be captured, wanting to deliver a message directly to Ravana. He is brought before the demon king, and with his tail set on fire as a punishment, proceeds to use that same burning tail to set the entire city of Lanka ablaze, leaping from rooftop to rooftop in an act of spectacular, chaotic defiance before returning across the ocean with the news Rama had been praying for. This leads to the epic's colossal final act, the building of a bridge. Rama's army of Vanaras, the monkey warriors, work with supernatural energy, writing Rama's name on stones and throwing them into the sea, where they miraculously float, creating the bridge from the tip of India to the shores of Lanka. The ensuing war is a spectacle of mythical proportions, filled with magical weapons, shape-shifting demons, and earth-shattering duels. Lakshmana is mortally wounded, and only a magical herb from a far-off mountain can save him. Once again, it is Hanuman who leaps into the sky, but when he cannot identify the specific herb, he lifts the entire mountain and carries it back to the battlefield, a testament to his limitless strength and devotion. The climax is the final confrontation between Rama and Ravana, a battle between divine righteousness and titanic, educated evil. Rama, with a special arrow bestowed upon him by the gods, finally vanquishes the 10-headed king. The reunion of Rama and Sita should be a moment of pure joy, but in a deeply complex and often debated turn, Rama questions Sita's purity after her long captivity in another man's house. To prove her unwavering fidelity, Sita undergoes a trial by fire. She calls upon her mother, the earth, to testify to her virtue and steps into a blazing pyre. The fire god Agni himself emerges from the flames, presenting Sita unharmed, her purity proven to the world. They return to Ayodhya and Rama is crowned king, beginning a golden age of perfect rule, Ram Rajya. The Ramayana endures because it presents archetypes of perfection, but also grapples with the painful costs of those ideals, creating a story that is at once divinely inspiring and profoundly, movingly human. But to understand the world of gods and heroes, we must now set sail for the wine-dark sea of the Aegean, to the windswept shore of a city that may or may not have existed, yet whose story has defined the Western idea of war for 3,000 years. We arrive at the blood-soaked plains of Troy, in the 10th and final year of a conflict sparked by a single face, that of Helen, whose beauty launched 1,000 ships. And our guide through this chaos is not a triumphant king, but a single, furious, near-invincible warrior consumed by a rage so absolute it threatens to undo the entire Greek army. This is Homer's Iliad, an epic that takes as its subject not the war itself, but the devastating consequences of one man's wrath. The poem's very first word is menin, rage. The rage of Achilles, son of a goddess and a mortal, the greatest of the Greeks. This is not a simple anger, it is a cosmic, soul-scorching fury that sets the entire tragedy in motion. The catalyst is a profound insult. After a plague sent by the god, Apollo ravages the Greek camp. The High King, Agamemnon, is forced to return a captured priestess, a woman he claimed as his prize of honor. To replenish his lost status, he arrogantly seizes Briseis, the war prize of Achilles. In this world, your honor, your time, is everything, quantified by the plunder you win. For Agamemnon to take what is Achilles is to declare him worthless, to strip him of his very identity. And so, Achilles makes a decision that shakes the heavens. He withdraws. He refuses to fight. He and his loyal warriors, the Myrmidons, sit in their tents while the battle rages, and he prays to his mother, the sea nymph Thetis, for vengeance. He asks her to convince Zeus, the king of the gods, to let the Trojans win, to let the Greeks be slaughtered until they are driven back to their ships, until Agamemnon is on his knees, begging for the hero he so casually dishonored. This is the central, shocking tension of the Iliad. Our hero actively wishes for his own side to lose. It's a breathtaking act of ego that questions the very foundations of the heroic code. And the gods are not distant observers, they are active, passionate participants, dividing their loyalties between the two sides. Zeus, bound by his promise to Thetis, aids the Trojans. Hera and Athena, harboring an ancient grudge against Troy, desperately scheme to help the Greeks. The battlefield becomes a divine chessboard, with mortals as the pieces, their fates manipulated by the whims of squabbling deities. We see the war through heartbreakingly human moments, none more poignant than Hector's farewell. The Trojan prince, the sole defender of his city, a man of duty and family, returns briefly to the walls of Troy. He finds his wife, Andromache, and their infant son, Astyanax. The baby is terrified by the gleaming helmet on his father's head, and Hector laughs, taking it off to hold his child. Andromache pleads with him not to return to the fight, foreseeing her own doom and that of their son if he falls. Hector's response is one of the most tragic speeches in all literature. He admits his own fear, but explains he would die of shame before the men and women of Troy if he shirked his duty. His fate and the fate of his city are already sealed, and he must walk toward them with courage. This scene gives a face to the enemy. Hector is not a monster, but a good man, a loving husband and father, making his final, heartbreaking choice. Back on the battlefield, with Achilles still absent, the tide turns decisively against the Greeks. The Trojans, led by a triumphant Hector, breach the Greek fortifications and set fire to their ships. It is in this moment of utter desperation that Achilles' closest companion, his soulmate Patroclus, makes a fateful plea. Dressed in Achilles' own legendary armor, he leads the Myrmidons into battle, hoping to rally the Greeks and terrify the Trojans by making them believe Achilles has returned. The ploy works brilliantly at first. Patroclus drives the Trojans back from the ships, a hero in his own right. But then, drunk on success, he disobeys Achilles' direct order and pursues the enemy all the way to the walls of Troy. There he meets Hector. Empowered by the god Apollo, Hector strikes him down. The death of Patroclus is the turning point of the entire epic. When the news reaches Achilles, his previous rage, born of pride, is instantly obliterated by a new, all-consuming rage born of grief and guilt. He screams a cry so terrible his mother hears it from the depths of the ocean. His wrath now has a new, singular focus, Hector. Reconciling with Agamemnon means nothing. The war itself means nothing. The only thing that matters is vengeance. Donning a set of new, divine armor forged by the god Hephaestus, Achilles returns to the battlefield like a force of nature. He cuts a bloody swath through the Trojan army, so ferociously that the river Scamander, choked with the corpses of those he has slain, rises up against him. He fights the river itself and wins. Finally, he corners Hector before the gates of Troy. In a moment of sheer terror, Hector turns and runs. Achilles chases him around the city walls 3 times before the gods intervene, and Hector, realizing his fate is upon him, turns to face his doom. The duel is short, brutal, and decisive. Achilles, knowing the weak point in the armor Hector stripped from Patroclus, drives his spear home. With his dying breath, Hector begs for his body to be returned to his family for proper burial. Achilles, his humanity utterly extinguished by grief, responds with a snarl. He denies the request, and in an act of shocking desecration, he ties Hector's corpse to the back of his chariot and drags it through the dust around the tomb of Patroclus day after day. It is a vision of raw, unadulterated vengeance that pushes the boundaries of heroism into something monstrous. The epic does not end with the fall of Troy. That happens later, off-stage. The Iliad ends with a moment of unexpected grace and the slow return of humanity. The king of Troy, the aged Priam, guided by the gods, ventures alone into the Greek camp at night. He kneels before Achilles, the murderer of his son, and kisses the hands that have killed so many of his children. He does not plead as a king, but as a father, asking Achilles to think of his own father, Peleus, and to show mercy. This courageous act finally breaks through Achilles' fury. He sees his own father in Priam and his own dead friend in Hector. He begins to weep. In that shared grief, the two enemies, Greek and Trojan, find a common humanity. Achilles agrees to return Hector's body, and for 11 days a truce is declared so the Trojans can mourn their greatest hero. The Iliad concludes not with the clang of swords, but with the solemn sound of funeral rites. It is a profound and sobering reminder that even in the midst of the most glorious war, there is only loss, and that true honor is found not in unyielding rage, but in the difficult, painful recognition of our shared suffering. From the shared grief and funeral pyres of the Iliad, we are swept from the shores of Troy onto the vast, unforgiving expanse of the wine-dark sea, embarking on a journey that would define the very idea of an adventure for millennia to come. This is the Odyssey, Homer's second great epic, but it is a story of a completely different nature. Where the Iliad was a tightly focused explosion of rage and honor on a single battlefield, the Odyssey is a sprawling, magical, and deeply personal voyage across the known world and beyond, a 10-year test of a man's mind, spirit, and unwavering desire to return home. Our hero is no longer the invincible, wrathful Achilles, but the cunning, versatile, and perpetually inventive Odysseus, king of the rocky island of Ithaca. His defining trait is not sheer strength, but metis, a quintessentially Greek concept meaning a combination of practical wisdom, cleverness, and shrewd deception. The Trojan War is over, the city is ashes, and the Greek heroes are scattering to their homelands. But for Odysseus, the journey back will be a war in itself, fought not against armies, but against the capricious whims of gods and the terrifying wonders of a world yet uncharted. His troubles begin almost immediately, earning the wrath of the sea god Poseidon, a divine grudge that will haunt every wave of his voyage. This conflict with the gods establishes a central theme: the struggle of human intelligence against the overwhelming, mindless forces of nature and divine power. We see this brilliance in one of his earliest and most famous encounters, the blinding of the Cyclops Polyphemus. Trapped in the cave of this man-eating, one-eyed giant, Odysseus's raw strength is useless. His only weapons are his wit and his words. He tricks the monster by telling him his name is Nobody, so that when he and his men drive a heated stake into Polyphemus's single eye, the giant's roars of agony are met with confusion by his fellow Cyclopes. When they ask who has hurt him, he can only scream, "Nobody is killing me." It is a masterstroke of cleverness, yet in his moment of escape, Odysseus's pride, his tragic flaw, overtakes his caution. As his ship pulls away, he reveals his true name, shouting back at the blinded monster so his fame might spread. This act of hubris gives Polyphemus the exact information he needs to pray to his father, Poseidon, cursing Odysseus to wander the sea for years, ensuring that his journey home becomes a decade-long ordeal. It is the perfect, painful lesson. His cunning saves him, but his ego dooms him. The world Odysseus navigates is a surreal and dreamlike tapestry of mythical perils, each island a new test of his character. On the island of Aea, he encounters the divine enchantress Circe, who turns his men into swine with a touch of her wand. Here, Odysseus is saved not just by his own cleverness, but with divine aid, receiving a magical herb from the god Hermes that makes him immune to her spells. He confronts her, sword drawn, but the encounter transforms into something more complex than a simple battle. He lives with her as a lover for a year, drawing from her deep knowledge of the world. This interlude shows a different facet of his heroism, the ability to adapt, to learn, and to form alliances, even in the most dangerous of circumstances. It is Circe who directs him to the very edge of the world, to the land of the dead. His descent into the underworld is perhaps the most psychologically profound episode of the entire epic. In this gray, shadowy realm, he performs a blood sacrifice that draws forth the shades of the dead, including the ghost of his own mother, whose death in his absence he learns of only now, and the spirit of the blind prophet Tyges, who foretells the remainder of his journey. He even sees the ghost of Achilles, whom he praises for the glory he won in life. Achilles' response is one of the most devastating lines in all of ancient literature. He tells Odysseus he would rather be a landless slave on earth than a king among the dead. It is a sobering correction to the warrior ethos of the Iliad, emphasizing that the Odyssey's ultimate value is not glory in death, but life and homecoming. Armed with the prophet's warnings, Odysseus and his crew face their most symbolic challenges. They must sail past the sirens, whose beautiful, irresistible song promises ultimate knowledge but lures sailors to their deaths on the rocky shore. Odysseus, craving that very knowledge, orders his men to plug their ears with beeswax and tie him tightly to the ship's mast, commanding them not to release him no matter how much he begs. It is a perfect illustration of his character. He is wise enough to know he cannot resist the temptation, so he uses his intellect to create a system that protects him from himself. Immediately after, they confront the nightmare straight-guarded by two immortal horrors, Scylla, a six-headed, 12-legged monster perched on a cliff who snatches men from the deck, and Charybdis, a massive ship-swallowing whirlpool on the other side. Tyges had told him there is no fighting Scylla. She is a force of nature, a loss that must be accepted to avoid total destruction. Odysseus, forced to choose the lesser of two evils, sacrifices 6 of his men to Scylla's snapping jaws to save his ship from being utterly consumed by Charybdis. It is a heartbreaking, pragmatic decision by a leader who has learned that in this world, survival often requires tragic compromise. These sequential trials are not just random adventures. They are a graduated curriculum in restraint, foresight, and the management of inevitable loss. After losing his last ship and all his remaining crew to their own folly, they foolishly slaughter the sacred cattle of the sun god Helios. Odysseus alone washes up on the idyllic island of the nymph Calypso. She offers him what seems like the ultimate prize, immortality, eternal youth, and herself as his consort. He lives with her for 7 years, yet he is miserable. Every day he sits on the shore, staring across the sea, weeping for his home and his wife. This is the core of the Odyssey's power. It is not just an adventure story. It is about the human spirit's profound, unshakable longing for home, for identity, for the familiar and the real. The glittering temptations of immortality and eternal pleasure mean nothing to him compared to the rocky, unassuming island of Ithaca, his aging wife Penelope, and the son he has never met. He chooses a finite, mortal life with his family over a timeless, perfect existence with a goddess. It is perhaps his most heroic choice. Finally, with the help of the goddess Athena, he returns to Ithaca, but his trials are not over. His palace is overrun by over 100 arrogant suitors, all vying for Penelope's hand. Certain Odysseus is dead and devouring his wealth. The hero does not simply reveal himself and reclaim his throne. Instead, Athena disguises him as a ragged, old beggar. This final act is the ultimate test of his Metis. He must enter his own home as a stranger, enduring insults and abuse from the suitors, all while secretly observing their disrespect and his loyal servant's faithfulness. He witnesses the steadfast brilliance of his wife Penelope, who has held the suitors at bay for years with her own famous cunning, promising to choose a new husband only after she finishes weaving a burial shroud for Odysseus's father, which she secretly unravels each night. The emotional climax of the epic is not a battle with a monster, but a quiet, intimate moment of recognition. Revealing his true identity only to his son Telemachus and a few loyal servants, Odysseus plans his revenge. The final test is the one Penelope herself unknowingly sets. She announces she will marry the man who can string Odysseus's great bow, a weapon only he could wield, and shoot an arrow through the aligned heads of 12 axe shafts. The suitors all try and humiliatingly fail. The old beggar, amid their ridicule, asks to try. He easily strings the bow, and in that single, fluid motion, his disguise falls away. He stands revealed not as a ragged wanderer, but as the king, the warrior, the master of his house. What follows is a bloody and cathartic slaughter, as Odysseus and Telemachus purge the palace of its corruption. The final reunion with Penelope is a masterpiece of understated emotion. She is cautious, unsure, testing this man who claims to be her husband after 20 years. She orders their marriage bed to be moved, knowing a secret that only Odysseus could know, that he himself built their bed from a living olive tree, a secret rooted in the very foundation of their home. When he explodes with the true story of its construction, Penelope's heart melts, and they are finally, truly reunited, their trust sealed not by passion alone, but by a shared secret that symbolizes the permanence of their bond and the home he endured so much to regain. Now we leave the sun-drenched shores of the Mediterranean behind and journey north, into a world forged from ice and fire, a realm of towering glaciers, dark forests, and endless winter nights illuminated only by the shimmering dance of the aurora borealis. This is the domain of the Norse, a worldview as stark, brutal, and beautiful as the landscape that inspired it, preserved in the haunting, enigmatic verses of the poetic Edda. Unlike the unified narratives of Homer or Valmiki, the Edda is not a single story but a collection of ancient poems, a patchwork of myths and wisdom passed down by skalds and poets, only later written down on calfskin in 13th century Iceland. These poems are our most direct window into the Viking soul, whispering tales of a cosmos that is dynamic, perilous, and fated for a spectacular, fiery end. The Norse universe begins not with a benevolent creator, but in a vast, yawning emptiness called Ginnungagap, a chasm between the primordial realm of fire, Muspelheim, and the world of ice, Niflheim. Where the heat and the cold met, the ice dripped, and from those melting rime drops formed the first being, Ymir, a colossal, hermaphroditic frost giant. And from Ymir's sweat, more giants were born. This is a creation born of elemental conflict, a theme that will echo throughout every myth. The gods themselves come later when one of Ymir's descendants, the cow Ordumbla, licks the salty ice blocks and frees another being, Beri, whose grandson will become the All-Father, Odin. Together with his brothers, Odin slays the primeval giant Ymir, and from his corpse they build the entire world. His flesh becomes the earth, his blood the oceans, his bones the mountains, his skull the sky, and his brain the clouds. This is a universe constructed from the body of a slain ancestor, a constant reminder that life and structure are born from violence and sacrifice. At the very center of this cosmos stands Yggdrasil, the world tree, an immense and sacred ash. Its branches stretch high above the heavens, its 3 great roots delve into 3 separate wells, and it holds the 9 realms in its boughs. This is not a safe, peaceful place. It is a tree under constant siege. A squirrel named Ratatoska runs up and down its trunk, carrying spiteful messages between a great eagle perched at the top and the dragon Nidhogg, who gnaws perpetually at its roots. This is the Norse reality in microcosm, a magnificent structure perpetually assailed by chaos and decay, a system maintained only through constant effort. The gods who inhabit these realms are not distant, omnipotent beings. They are fallible, passionate, and deeply relatable in their struggles. At the pinnacle sits Odin, the one-eyed All-Father, a god of war, poetry, death, and above all, a thirst for wisdom so profound it defines his entire existence. He sacrificed his own eye in the well of Mimir to drink from its waters of knowledge. He later hanged himself, pierced by his own spear, from the branches of Yggdrasil for 9 days and 9 nights to discover the secret of the rune. Odin is a god who willingly endures agony and mutilation for understanding, a terrifying and compelling figure who knows that true power comes not from force alone, but from secrets won through immense personal cost. Then there is Thor, the champion of mankind, the defender of the gods' fortress Asgard. With his mighty hammer Mjolnir, his strength belt Mejingjord, and his iron gloves, he is the embodiment of raw, straightforward power, the thunder god who rides across the sky in his chariot drawn by 2 goats. His adventures are often colossal brawls against the giants, the eternal enemies of gods and men. Yet he is also deeply human, prone to a mighty temper, fiercely protective of his family and followers, and at times hilariously gullible, as when he is tricked into believing a giant king's daughter is the god Freyja whom he is to marry. He is the people's god, the reliable protector in a dangerous world. And then there is Loki, the trickster, the shape-shifter, the agent of chaos. He is a blood brother to Odin, yet he is also the sire of monsters, the wolf Fenrir, the world serpent Jormungandr, and Hel, the ruler of the dead. Loki is not purely evil, he is a necessary catalyst. His cunning and mischief often get the gods into trouble, but his cleverness is also frequently the only thing that can get them out of it. He is the unpredictable spark in a system that craves order, the character who constantly asks, "What if?" But his pranks grow increasingly cruel, his insults more personal, until he engineers the death of Odin's own son, the beloved god Balder the Beautiful. This act of malice crosses an unforgivable line, and for it, the gods bind Loki to a rock with the entrails of his own son, with a serpent dripping venom onto his face. His loyal wife, Sigyn, holds a bowl to catch the poison, but when she must empty it, the venom hits Loki and he writhes in agony, his convulsions causing earthquakes. It is a horrific punishment, but it is not the end. It is merely the prelude to the final, inevitable cataclysm that every prophecy whispers of, Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. This is not an apocalypse that might happen. It is a destiny carved into the fabric of reality, an event the gods know is coming and yet are powerless to prevent. The signs are dreadfully clear. First will come Fimbulwinter, 3 successive winters with no summer in between, a catastrophic freeze that will shatter human society and turn brother against brother. The sun and moon will be swallowed by the wolves Skull and Hati that have chased them across the sky for all time. The stars will vanish from the heavens. The bonds of kinship and law will dissolve, and the world will plunge into chaos. Then the great horn Gjallarhorn will sound, and Heimdall, the ever-vigilant watchman of the gods, will summon the inhabitants of Asgard to their final battle. The chains will break, Loki will free himself from his torment, and he will steer the ship Naglfar, built from the untrimmed fingernails and toenails of the dead, carrying a horde of giants to the battlefield called Vigrid. The wolf Fenrir, now grown so vast that his upper jaw scrapes the sky and his lower jaw drags on the earth, will break his magical bonds and run with fire blazing from his eyes and nostrils. From the depths of the ocean, the Midgard serpent Jormungandr will rise, spewing venom and flooding the lands as it rides its way toward the final confrontation. And from the fiery realm of Muspelheim, the fire giant Surtur will advance, his flaming sword brighter than the sun, to set the world tree itself ablaze. The battles are fated, one-on-one, like pieces on a chessboard moving to their predetermined squares. The beloved god Freyr, who gave up his magic sword for love, will fight Surtur with only an antler and will fall. The one-handed god of justice Tyr will face Garm, the hound of Hell's Gate, and they will slay each other. Thor, in his greatest and final act, will battle his ancient nemesis, the Midgard serpent. He will slay the colossal beast with a mighty blow from Mjolnir, but will then stagger only 9 steps away before succumbing to the serpent's poisonous breath, drowning in the venom that surrounds him. And at the center of it all, Odin will ride to meet the wolf Fenrir. The All-Father, the seeker of all knowledge, will be consumed by the beast he tried so desperately to bind. But his death will be avenged immediately by his son Vidar, who will tear the wolf's jaw asunder. Finally, Loki and Heimdall, the watchman and the trickster, the forces of order and chaos, will meet and destroy one another. Surtur's fire will then engulf Yggdrasil, and the heavens will crack, the earth will sink beneath the waves, and all of creation will be consumed in a final, silent, all-encompassing inferno. Yet the Edda does not end in total annihilation. From the sea, a new world will emerge, green and beautiful and fertile. A new sun, the daughter of the Old One, will warm the land. A handful of gods will survive the conflagration, including Odin's sons Vidar and Vali, and Thor's sons Modi and Magni, who will inherit their father's mighty hammer. And 2 humans, Lif and Lifthrasir, who hid themselves deep within the wood of Yggdrasil, will emerge to repopulate the earth. The cycle begins again, not as a perfect paradise, but as a world cleansed of its old failures and renewed with potential. The Norse vision is thus one of profound, sobering courage. They knew the universe was fated to burn, that their gods were doomed, and that no victory was permanent. Yet the highest virtue was to face that inevitable doom with unwavering resolve, to fight on even when every prophecy foretold your defeat. It is a mythology not of hope for a better afterlife, but of majestic, tragic dignity in the face of a beautiful and merciless cosmos. Emerging from the cosmic doom of Ragnarok, we find ourselves in a world where the fate of gods is replaced by the destinies of mortal heroes, where the grand mythology of the Edda gives way to the gritty, blood-soaked family sagas of legendary kings and warriors. Among these, one epic stands as a monumental pillar of Norse literature, a story so potent and richly woven that its echoes would resound through the centuries to inspire some of the greatest artistic creations of the modern world. This is the Volsunga Saga, a sprawling, tragic tale of a cursed lineage, a dragon's horde, and a cycle of vengeance that consumes everyone it touches. It is the quintessential northern epic of heroism, love, and fate, a dark mirror to the more optimistic quests of other traditions, and it all begins with a single, covetous act that unleashes a plague upon a family for generations. Our story starts not with a hero but with a god, none other than Loki, the trickster, in one of his most malicious and consequential escapades. He murders a young boy, the son of a farmer, purely for sport. To escape the wrath of the boy's father, Loki seizes the opportunity to cover his crime by capturing a magical otter that happens to be feasting on a salmon by a river. Unbeknownst to him, this otter is yet another son of the same farmer, transformed by a curse. When Loki presents the otter's skin to the father, the man recognizes his son and, in a fury, demands a blood price. The ransom is immense. He orders Loki and the gods Odin and Honir, who are traveling with him, to fill the otter's skin with gold and then cover it entirely with more gold. To acquire this treasure, Loki seeks out a dwarf named Andvari, who lives in a waterfall and possesses a vast hoard of gold. Loki captures the dwarf and steals every last piece of his wealth, including a single, beautiful golden ring that Andvari desperately tries to hide. As a final act of spite, the dwarf lays a terrible curse upon the ring, declaring that it and the entire hoard would bring about the death and destruction of whoever owns it. This ring, Andvaranot, becomes the engine of the entire tragedy that follows. The gold is paid, the otter skin is covered, but one whisker remains visible, a small, lingering flaw that signifies the curse can never be fully contained or paid off. This cursed treasure then passes from one pair of hands to another, leaving a trail of fratricide and ruin in its wake until it finds its way into the possession of the dragon Fafnir, who was once a giant but was so consumed by greed for the hoard that he transformed into a monstrous, treasure-guarding serpent, lying upon his pile of gold in a desolate heath, his very nature poisoned by the curse he covets. This is the world into which our hero, Sigurd, the Norse counterpart to the German Siegfried, is born, a scion of the Volsung line, a family already marked by a heroic but tragic destiny. His father, Sigmund, is a legendary warrior in his own right, famous for being the only man able to pull the sword Gram from the trunk of the great tree Barnstokker in the hall of King Volsung. Sigurd's story is one of a classic hero's upbringing. He is fostered by the cunning dwarf Regin, a master smith who is also, crucially, the brother of the dragon Fafnir. Regin sees in the young, gifted Sigurd a tool for his own vengeance and greed. He teaches the boy the arts of war and craft, all while carefully nurturing a bitter resentment in him, telling Sigurd of the great dragon that hoards a mountain of gold, a treasure that should rightfully be his. He constantly questions Sigurd's courage, prodding him to prove his mettle by slaying the beast. But Sigurd is no fool. He knows that to face such a monster, he will need a weapon worthy of the task. He demands that Regin reforge his father's shattered sword, Gram. Regin initially forges a blade that shatters on the anvil when Sigurd strikes it. Undeterred, Sigurd gathers the fragments of the original sword, and from this ancestral steel, Regin forges a new Gram, a sword so perfect and strong that when Sigurd brings it down upon the anvil, it splits the heavy iron block clean in half. With this legendary weapon in hand, Sigurd is ready for his destiny. The slaying of the dragon Fafnir is one of the most iconic scenes in all of world literature, a moment that would inspire countless depictions, from ancient carvings to the operas of Richard Wagner. Regin advises Sigurd to dig a pit in the path Fafnir uses to slither down to the water and to stab the beast from below as it passes overhead. As Sigurd waits in the trench, the earth begins to tremble and the dragon's venomous breath falls upon him like a toxic rain. But Sigurd holds his nerve. As the monster's vulnerable underbelly passes over the pit, he drives Gram upward with all his strength, delivering the fatal wound. As he dies, Fafnir speaks, warning Sigurd that the cursed gold will be his doom and that Regin, his own brother, will betray him. No sooner has the dragon breathed his last than Regin appears, his eyes gleaming not with gratitude but with avarice. He asks Sigurd to cut out the dragon's heart and roast it for him. While cooking the heart, Sigurd, testing it with his finger, burns himself and instinctively puts his thumb in his mouth. The moment the dragon's blood touches his tongue, a miracle occurs. He can understand the language of the birds. Their chirping, which was once mere noise, becomes a clear, urgent warning. They reveal that Regin is plotting to kill him to claim the entire hoard for himself. Forewarned by this magical gift, Sigurd acts first, beheading the treacherous Regin. He then loads his horse, the magnificent Grey Granny, descended from Odin's own steed Sleipnir, with the colossal treasure, and with it the ring Anvaranot, taking the curse upon himself, though he remains blissfully unaware of its true power. His next quest leads him to a fortress surrounded by a wall of shimmering flames. A shield maiden Valkyrie named Brynhild lies within, cast into an enchanted sleep by Odin as punishment for disobeying him in a battle. She is to sleep until a man without fear comes to wake her. Sigurd, the dragon slayer, rides through the magical fire, finds the warrior maiden in her armor, and awakens her. What follows is one of the great tragic love stories of the ancient world. They pledge their lives to one another, swearing oaths of eternal fidelity. But this is a saga, and happiness is fleeting. Sigurd's journey continues, and he arrives at the court of King Gijuki, where he is greeted with honor. The queen, a sorceress named Grimhild, recognizes his immense value and decides to bind him to her own family. She prepares a potion of forgetfulness, and when Sigurd drinks it, his memory of Brynhild and his sacred vows to her vanish from his mind. He is persuaded to marry the king's beautiful daughter, Gudrun. Worse still, Grimhild and her son see an opportunity to secure Brynhild for Gudrun's brother, Gunnar. They convince Sigurd to use his magic to help them win her, since only a hero who can ride through the flames can claim her. Gunnar attempts the ride, but his horse will not brave the fire. In a moment of catastrophic deception, Sigurd and Gunnar use a magic spell to swap appearances. Disguised as Gunnar, Sigurd rides through the flames once more and wins Brynhild, but this time he does so under a false name, and he spends 3 nights with her in the fortress, placing his unsheathed sword Gram between them in the bed as a symbol that he is honor-bound to another. Brynhild, believing the man in her bed is Gunnar, is forced to agree to marry him, her heart breaking for the lost Sigurd whom she believes has forgotten her. The deception is a poison that will infect everyone involved. The inevitable revelation is devastating. In a bitter argument with Gudrun, Brynhild boasts that her husband, Gunnar, was the brave hero who rode through the flames, a feat she believes Sigurd was too cowardly to attempt. In a moment of cruel triumph, Gudrun reveals the truth, showing Brynhild the ring Anvaranot, which Sigurd had taken from her and given to Gudrun as a bridal gift. Brynhild recognizes the ring. It is the one Sigurd had given to her during their first true pledge of love. The realization that she has been deceived, that she was betrayed by the man she loved and has now married his friend under false pretenses, shatters her. Her love curdles into a cold, furious hatred. She feels dishonored and stripped of her agency. She now sees Sigurd not as her lost love, but as the architect of her humiliation, and she demands vengeance as the only way to restore her honor. She goads her husband Gunnar and his brother Hogni, claiming that Sigurd has broken his oaths to them and must be killed. Bound by their own codes of honor and manipulated by Brynhild's wounded pride, the brothers agree, but they cannot bring themselves to murder their blood brother directly. They enlist their younger brother, Guttorm, who is not bound by the oath of brotherhood, and give him a potion of ferocity. Guttorm attacks Sigurd in his bed. Though mortally wounded, the great hero manages to hurl his sword Gram at his fleeing assassin, cutting him in half before he dies. The tragedy reaches its peak when Brynhild, hearing Gudrun's screams of grief, lets out a laugh so terrible it chills the blood. But her triumph is hollow and short-lived. Her love for Sigurd, now twisted by grief and remorse, overwhelms her. She confesses the entire truth of the deception, absolving Gunnar and Hogni of blame and taking the full weight of the curse upon herself. Declaring that she will follow Sigurd in death, she has a massive funeral pyre built, dons her finest armor, lays herself beside Sigurd's body, and orders a servant to pierce her with a sword. As the flames consume them, the curse of the ring Anvaranot has claimed its 2 most glorious victims. The saga, however, does not end with their deaths. The curse continues to work its way through the generations, driving Gudrun to a horrific revenge against her own brothers for their part in Sigurd's murder, leading to more bloodshed and sorrow. a relentless tide of fate that demonstrates the Norse belief in the inescapable nature of a prophesied doom. The Volsunga Saga's power lies in this unflinching portrayal of how noble intentions are twisted by greed, deception, and a cruel fate, creating a timeless story that feels startlingly modern in its psychological complexity. From the fire and ice of the Norse sagas, we journey to a different kind of northern landscape, the vast, silent forests and countless lakes of Finland. Here, the wind whispers through the pines not of doom, but of ancient songs. This is the world of the Kalevala, Finland's national epic, a monumental work that, unlike many of the tales we have explored, was not born from a single ancient text, but was lovingly and artistically compiled in the 19th century by a scholar named Elias Lönnrot. He traveled the countryside, listening to and transcribing the oral poetry and runic songs that had been passed down from one generation to the next for centuries, weaving these thousands of individual verses into a single, cohesive narrative. The result is a creation story and a heroic epic unlike any other, deeply rooted in the shamanistic traditions of the Baltic Finns, where the greatest power in the universe is not strength or even a sword, but the power of a song, the magic of a perfectly spoken word. The epic begins not with a god carving order from chaos, but with a solitary, primordial bard. The world is a vast, empty sea, and the air is a constant, lonely wind. For 700 years, a virgin spirit of the air, Ilmater, descends into the waters, becoming the mother of the waters. She floats, a cosmic womb, until a teal builds its nest on her knee and lays its eggs. When the bird moves, its eggs shatter, and from the fragments the world is formed. The yolk becomes the sun, the white becomes the moon, and the scattered pieces become the stars and the earth. It is a creation born from patience, accident, and nature's own gentle, unhurried rhythms. From this primal mother is born the central hero of the Kalevala, Väinämöinen. He is not a young, brash warrior. He is an old man, a sage and the first and greatest of all singers. He is born already an adult with a vast beard and a profound knowledge of the cosmos, and his purpose is to bring order to the newly formed world through his songs. He clears the forests and sows the first barley, not with brute force, but by singing the landscapes into being. This establishes the unique and captivating magic system that defines the Kalevala. Magic is not cast with wands or potions, but through powerful, poetic incantations. A skilled singer, a taiteilija, knows the origin songs for every rock, tree, and creature, and by reciting these songs, they can exert control over the very fabric of reality. This belief, known as luot, gives the epic an almost hypnotic, melodic quality, where conflicts are often settled not with swords, but with verses. We see this power in one of the epic's most dramatic early confrontations, the contest between Väinämöinen and the arrogant young Joukahainen. Joukahainen, boasting of his own knowledge, challenges the ancient sage to a duel of magic as they meet on a narrow road. He boasts that he has seen and knows everything, but Väinämöinen, unimpressed, simply begins to sing. He doesn't sing a complex spell, but a simple, devastating litany of the true, deep origins of the world. With each line, he reveals a fundamental truth that Joukahainen cannot possibly know. Under the weight of this primordial wisdom, Joukahainen's own power crumbles. His sled is sung into a grove of alders, his whip into a reed in the water, and his horse into a rock in the stream. Finally, Väinämöinen sings Joukahainen himself into the swamp, and as the mud rises to the young man's waist and then his chest, his bravado turns to pure terror. He pleads for his life, finally offering the one thing that could possibly interest the ancient sage, the hand of his own beautiful sister, Aino. It is a stark lesson in the hierarchy of this world. Youthful pride is meaningless against the accumulated, sung wisdom of the ages. This encounter sets in motion a chain of events centered on the quest for a bride, a common epic theme, but in the Kalevala, it becomes the catalyst for the creation of its most famous and mysterious artifact, the Sampo. The story shifts to the dark and misty region of Pohjola, the Northland, a land ruled by the powerful and vengeful Lauhi, the mistress of the North. To win a bride from Pohjola, the heroes must perform impossible tasks. This is where we meet the other central heroes. There is Ilmarinen, the eternal smith, a divine craftsman who forged the dome of the sky. He is the embodiment of skillful labor, a patient and steadfast counterpoint to Vainamorinen's mystical wisdom. And then there is Lemminkainen, the reckless, handsome, and overly confident ladies' man, a warrior whose impulsiveness constantly gets him into trouble, requiring his mother's powerful magic to repeatedly rescue him from death. It is for Ilmarinen that Lauhi sets the ultimate task: forge the Sampo. Described as a magical mill or device, the Sampo has a lid of many colors, and it grinds out endless prosperity, grain, salt, and gold. It represents boundless fortune, the ultimate prize for any community. Ilmarinen, after 3 days of furious, divine labor, succeeds. He forges the Sampo, but in a tragic twist of fate common to these stories, he does not get to keep it. Lauhi seizes the artifact for herself, locking it away inside a copper mountain in Pohjola, and the land of Kalevala remains in poverty while the north flourishes. This injustice fuels the epic's grand final adventure, the quest to steal the Sampo back. Vainamoinen, Ilmarinen, and Lemminkainen band together and sail to Pohjola. Vainamoinen lulls the entire land to sleep with his most enchanting music, and they succeed in breaking into the mountain and retrieving the Sampo, but their escape is not clean. Lauhi awakens and conjures a terrible fog to pursue them. A colossal sea battle ensues, not just with weapons but with magic. Vainamoinen sings up a sea monster from the deep, and Lauhi counters by transforming herself into a massive bird of prey. In the ensuing chaos, the Sampo is shattered, its lid and pieces scattering into the sea. Lauhi manages to salvage only a few small fragments, which she curses to bring only minimal prosperity to Pohjola. Vainamoinen and his companions gather the broken pieces of the lid and return to Kalevala. Though they did not secure the whole Sampo, these fragments are enough to bring fertility and good fortune to their own land. The epic concludes not with a grand cataclysm, but with Vainamorinen's departure. After a new, peaceful age is established, a child is born to the Virgin Marjota, a clear parallel to the Christian story of the Virgin Mary, signaling the end of the pagan era. Recognizing that his time has passed, the old sage sings one last song, builds a bronze boat, and sails away to the heavens, promising to return one day when he is needed again. The Kalevala's magic resonates because it is a power accessible not just to gods, but to anyone with the patience and wisdom to learn the old songs, a testament to the enduring power of words, memory, and the human voice to shape the world. Let us now cross the sea from the misty shores of Finland to the rugged, green hills of Wales, a land where every valley seems to whisper with ancient voices and every crumbling castle holds a fragment of a forgotten dream. Here we discover a collection of stories as intricate and layered as the Celtic knotwork that adorns its pages, the Mabinogion. This is not a single, unified epic, but a collection of 11 prose tales, preserved in medieval Welsh manuscripts like the White Book of Rhydderch and the Red Book of Hergest. These stories are the foundation of Welsh mythology, a rich tapestry woven from strands of primal myth, heroic legend, and the earliest seeds of what would become the great Arthurian cycle. They offer a window into a worldview that is both deeply strange and profoundly beautiful, where the boundaries between the human world and the other world are as thin as morning mist, and where a single wrong or a broken promise can unleash consequences that ripple across generations. The heart of the collection is the 4 branches of the Mabinogi, 4 interconnected tales that form its mythological core. The first branch introduces us to Will, Prince of Dyfed, a story that immediately establishes the intimate link between the mortal and the supernatural. While hunting, Beowulf strays into the otherworld and commits a grave breach of etiquette by setting his own hounds on a stag that was being chased by a majestic, otherworldly king, and his hounds of gleaming white with red ears. To atone for this offense, Beowulf agrees to swap places and kingdoms with this king, Aron, Lord of Anon, the Welsh otherworld. For a year and a day, Beowulf must rule Aron's kingdom and, most crucially, defeat Aron's rival Halfdan in single combat. He must do this while perfectly maintaining the disguise, even sharing Aron's bed with his beautiful wife, yet never touching her. Beowulf succeeds, showing not only his martial prowess but, more importantly, his integrity and honor. His reward is the eternal friendship of Aron and the title Pendefig David, or Head of David, cementing a sacred bond between his kingdom and the divine realm. This theme of intertwined destinies continues as Beowulf wins his bride, Rhiannon, a figure of radiant power and grace who first appears to him magically riding a white horse, a vision that seems to slow time itself. Yet their story is marred by tragedy when their newborn son is mysteriously abducted on the night of his birth. Rhiannon is falsely accused of murdering him and is punished cruelly, forced to sit every day at the horse block outside the castle, telling her story to all who pass and offering to carry them on her back like a beast of burden. This heartbreaking image of a queen subjected to such humiliation speaks to the collection's deep interest in justice, loss, and the endurance of the human spirit. The child, of course, is found, raised by a nobleman, and eventually returned, his identity revealed in a moment of breathtaking recognition, but the scars of the injustice against Rhiannon remain. If the first branch deals with alliance and wrongful accusation, the second plunges us into a tragedy of international proportions, the tale of Branwen, daughter of Llŷ. This is perhaps the most sweeping and devastating story in the entire Mabinogion. It begins with a fateful decision by Bendigeidfran, also known as Bran the Blessed, a king of Britain so colossal that no house could contain him, who could wade across the Irish Sea. His sister, Branwen, is the most beautiful woman in the world, and to secure an alliance, she is married to Matholwch, the King of Ireland. The marriage begins in goodwill, but it is shattered by an unforgivable insult. Branwen's half-brother, Efnisien, a volatile and spiteful character who embodies chaotic malice, mutilates Matholwch's horses, feeling his consent for the marriage was not sought. This single act of spite poisons the relationship. Matholwch, though placated by Bendigeidfran with immense gifts, returns to Ireland nursing a deep-seated humiliation and takes it out on Branwen. She is stripped of her royal status, forced to work in the kitchens, and beaten every day. But Branwen is not passive, she is resourceful and resilient. She tames a starling, teaching it to recognize her brother's face, and sends a secret message tied to its leg across the sea. When the giant Bendigeidfran receives this word of his sister's suffering, his wrath is a force of nature. He gathers his host and wades to Ireland, his mighty body serving as a bridge for his armies. The Irish, terrified, sue for peace, offering to build Bendigeidfran a house large enough to hold him, a house they secretly construct with brackets on every pillar, planning to hang leather bags containing armed warriors inside to ambush the Britons. But the ever-suspicious Efnisien uncovers the plot and, in a scene of horrific violence, crushes the skulls of the hidden warriors inside their bags. The peace talks collapse and a cataclysmic battle erupts that is so brutal it leaves only 7 men alive. 5 pregnant women back in Wales repopulate the island, and of the royal families, only Branwen, her infant son, and a handful of warriors survive. The tragedy, however, is absolute. Branwen's son is killed by the grieving Irish survivors. Heartbroken, gazing from Ireland back to the shores of her homeland, Branwen dies of a broken heart, lamenting that 2 islands were destroyed because of her. The story is a profound and sobering anti-war epic, a lesson in how petty grievances, unchecked malice, and the chain of insult and vengeance can lead to the utter annihilation of 2 great cultures. Beyond these core mythological cycles, the Mabinogion is also a treasure trove of standalone tales brimming with magic, wonder, and the raw, untamed power of the Celtic imagination. We encounter Lud and Leaflys, a story of a king who must save Britain from 3 supernatural plagues, including terrifying screams that echo every May Eve, caused by 2 dragons fighting, and a giant who casts a spell that makes the entire court fall asleep, allowing him to steal all their food and drink. The solutions are as fantastical as the problems, involving buried dragons at the center of the island and a magical cauldron that can resurrect the dead, though the warriors who return can never speak again. This is a world where magic is not a neat, systematic art, but a wild, inherent force in the land itself. Shapeshifting is a common theme, a fluid movement between forms that reflects a worldview where identity is not fixed. In the tale of Culhwch and Olwen, which contains the earliest surviving prose Arthurian narrative, we meet the hero Culhwch, who is cursed by his stepmother to love only one woman, Olwen, the daughter of the malevolent giant Ysbaddaden. Olwen is described as so beautiful that white flowers spring up in her footprints. To win her, Culhwch enlists the help of his cousin, a young and vibrant King Arthur, and his band of heroic companions. The tasks Ysbaddaden sets are a spectacular, impossible shopping list of mythological proportions. Culhwch must procure the basket of Gwydnu Garanhir, which can feed the whole world, the drinking horn of Gwwl god Gododin, the cauldron of Dirnach the giant, and the comb and shears lost between the ears of the great boar Twrch Tiawith. The hunt for this boar is an epic chase across the entire island of Britain, a chaotic, destructive rampage that involves multiple transformations and battles, showcasing the tale's deep roots in a primordial, pre-Arthurian mythology. The Mabinogion presents an Arthur who is not yet the lofty emperor of later romance, but a powerful Celtic warlord, a leader of a war band immersed in a world of giants, magical boars, and formidable witches. To journey into the Mabinogion is to walk in a landscape where the hills themselves might be sleeping kings, where a stumble on a path could lead you into a kingdom of gods, and where the echoes of a story can bridge 1,000 years, reminding us that the oldest magic is often found in the land beneath our feet and the tales we have always told. But from the mists of the Welsh otherworld, we now voyage across the sea to a land of even more raw, untamed energy. A place where heroism is not a matter of measured wisdom, but a fire that burns with a terrifying, beautiful, and ultimately self-consuming intensity. Welcome to the rugged, rain-swept coasts and rolling green hills of ancient Ireland, a land of countless petty kingdoms and proud warriors whose legends are preserved in the Ulster cycle. This body of myth, centered on the heroes of the Ulaid in what is now Northern Ireland, presents a world of brutal honor, potent magic, and a warrior culture so fierce it feels almost alien. And at its white-hot center blazes the most iconic hero of all Celtic literature, Chulainn. His very origin story sets him apart as a being touched by the divine. He was born Setanta, the son of the mortal woman Daitin, and in many versions the sun god Lug himself. From his earliest youth, his prodigious nature was clear. As a small boy, he heard the druid Cathbad prophecy that whoever took up arms on that certain day would have a life of everlasting fame, though it would be tragically short. Without a moment's hesitation, the young Setanta raced to the king and demanded weapons. He immediately outgrew and shattered every set of arms and chariot given to him until he received the king's own royal gear. That same day, he committed his first great act, one that would give him his famous name. Invited to a feast at the house of the blacksmith Chulainn, he arrived late, and the smith's massive, ferocious hound was set loose to guard the property. The beast charged the boy, who, with no weapon at hand, killed it by driving a sliotar, a hard leather ball used in the Irish game of hurling, down its throat with such force that it exploded out the other side. The smith was devastated by the loss of his great guardian, and in a gesture that defines the Celtic heroic code of honor and restitution, the boy offered to take the hound's place. He swore he would guard Chulainn's property himself until a new pup could be raised and trained. From that day forward, he was known as Chulainn, the Hound of Chulainn. This name, a title of ferocious loyalty and protection, also hints at the dual nature that would define his life. He was both the civilized defender of his people and the unleashed primal force of the Hound. This duality manifests in his most famous and horrifying characteristic, the Ryostrad or warp spasm. This was not a simple battle rage. It was a terrifying physical transformation that overcame him in the heat of combat, a monstrous distortion of his body that revealed the otherworldly power raging within him. The ancient texts describe it in grotesque, unforgettable detail. One eye would suck back into his head so deeply a crane could hardly pluck it out, while the other bulged out onto his cheek. His mouth stretched wide enough to touch his ears, spewing sparks of fire and blood. His sinews and tendons coiled around his bones like ropes, and every hair on his body stood on end, each tip tipped with a droplet of blood or a spark of fire. His body would contort, spinning around inside his own skin, with his heels, knees, and calves shifting to the front and his feet and shins to the back. He became a living cyclone of destruction, a spectacle of pure, unrestrained violence that was as terrifying to his friends as it was to his foes. This was the price of his power, the visible mark of a hero whose very essence was too vast and terrible to be contained within a human form for long. Chulainn's legend is a tapestry of incredible feats, from single-handedly defending the boy troop of Emain Macha against a full adult army to his tragic slaying of his own best friend and foster brother Ferdiad in a heart-wrenching 3-day duel at a river ford. But all these stories build toward the colossal conflict that serves as the centerpiece of the entire Ulster cycle, the Tain Bo Cuailnge, the cattle raid of Cooley. This epic is not a war over land or a throne, but over livestock specifically, the most magnificent and magical bull in all of Ireland, the Don Cuailnge. The story begins with a game of one-upmanship between Queen Medb of Connacht and her husband, King Ailill. As they lie in bed one night, they begin to compare their wealth and possessions, and they find their fortunes are perfectly matched in every way except for one thing. Ailill possesses a magnificent white-horned bull of such incomparable strength and beauty that Medb has nothing in her treasury to equal it. For a queen as proud and ambitious as Medb, this is an intolerable insult. Her power, her very identity, depends on surpassing her husband, so she dispatches messengers across Ireland to find a bull worthy of rivaling Ailill's. They return with news of the Don Cuailnge, the brown bull of Cooley, a beast of equal, if not greater, power belonging to the Kingdom of Ulster. Medb attempts to borrow the bull, but when her envoys drunkenly insult the Ulstermen, the deal falls through. Unwilling to accept defeat, she gathers a massive, unprecedented army from all corners of Ireland, a coalition of forces so vast it seemed the entire island was marching on Ulster to simply take the bull by force. The timing could not be more fortuitous for her, nor more catastrophic for the Ulstermen. The men of Ulster are laid low by a supernatural curse, the Sias Noindan, a debilitating illness of labor pains that strikes them in their time of greatest peril, a curse placed upon them by the vengeful goddess Macha for a past transgression. The entire fighting force of the kingdom is incapacitated, writhing in agony, utterly defenseless. All that is, except for one. Chulainn, still a teenager at the time, is exempt from the curse, either because of his divine youth or his semi-divine heritage. The defense of the entire province, the honor of the Ulaid, and the fate of the magical bull all rest on the shoulders of this single, adolescent warrior. What follows is one of the most extraordinary sequences in all of world mythology. Chulainn does not fight the entire army in a single, massive battle. Instead, he employs the ancient rite of single combat at a ford. He uses his knowledge of the land and his superhuman speed to harass Medb's army, challenging them to send their champions one by one to face him at various river crossings. He picks them off day after day in a series of devastating duels. He uses his legendary spear, the Gilgamesh, a barbed weapon that is thrown with the foot and whose barbs spread throughout a victim's body upon entry, making the wound impossible to survive. He is not just a warrior, he is a force of nature, a one-man guerrilla army holding a nation at bay. He becomes such a terrifying figure that Medb army is paralyzed with fear. They try everything to get past him, from sending entire battalions at once to using powerful magic and even attempting to bribe him. But Chulainn holds the line, his Ryastrad turning each confrontation into a blood-soaked spectacle of dismemberment and terror, his chariot leaving a wake of corpses that chokes the rivers. His stand is both magnificent and profoundly lonely, the ultimate expression of the hero's burden, defending a people who cannot, in that moment, defend themselves. The raid ultimately ends not with a decisive victory, but with a complex series of events involving the bulls themselves. The Don Chulainn is taken to Connacht, where it meets Aelul's white-horned bull in a titanic, earth-shaking fight that ranges across the entire island. The brown bull emerges victorious, goring its rival to death, but the Don Chulainn itself, wounded and driven mad by the ordeal, wanders back toward Ulster, its heart bursting as it reaches its homeland. The great conflict, born from a queen's wounded pride, ends with both magnificent creatures dead, a sobering commentary on the futility and waste of war, even one fought for the most magical of prizes. For Chulainn, the Táin is his greatest triumph, but it also seals his tragic destiny. His fame is now so great that every warrior in Ireland seeks to test themselves against him, and the gods themselves begin to take notice of this mortal who fights with the power of a deity. His life, as the Druid foretold, would be short, but his name, the Hound of Ulster, would echo through the ages as the ultimate symbol of a heroism so fierce it could defend a nation alone, and so bright it was destined to burn out in a final, heartbreaking blaze of glory. Now, to truly grasp the scale of this conflict, we need to understand the woman who set it all in motion, Queen Medb of Connacht. Medb is no simple villainess. She is one of the most complex and formidable figures in all of Celtic literature. Her primary motivation, as the ancient texts tell us, is rooted in a profound and very personal sense of sovereignty. The saga recounts how she and her husband, King Aelul, were comparing their respective wealth one evening, and to their astonishment, they found their fortunes were perfectly matched in every single category, from their lands and jewels to their flocks and herds. This parity was a symbol of their equal status, a balance of power that defined their rule. But then they came to their livestock. Aelul possessed one thing Medb did not, a magnificent white-horned bull of such legendary strength and beauty that it stood as the pinnacle of bovine perfection in all of Ireland. For Medb, this was an intolerable asymmetry. Her identity and power as a sovereign queen were intrinsically linked to her personal wealth and its superiority. To be without an equal to this bull was, in her eyes, a deficiency in her very sovereignty. She declares in the text, "For it is the wealth of a woman that is always counted after the wealth of her husband." She could not and would not abide being considered the lesser partner in any aspect. So she dispatches her messengers across the island to find a bull that could rival and hopefully surpass her husband's. They return with news of only one possibility, the Don Chulainn, the brown bull of Cooley, a beast of mythic power owned by a chieftain of Ulster. When her initial attempts to borrow the bull end in diplomatic insult, Medb's pride and ambition fuse into an unshakable resolve. She will have the bull, and if she cannot get it through negotiation, she will take it with the largest army Ireland has ever seen. This is not a petty squabble over livestock. It is a war launched to settle a domestic argument, a cosmic struggle for personal status that reveals the intense, often ruthless, drive for power that defines Medb's character. With her army assembled, Medebe's march into Ulster should have been a swift, unopposed victory. The entire province's warrior class is laid low by a supernatural curse, the CS Noindon, a debilitating illness that strikes them with the pains of childbirth, a punishment from the goddess Macha for a past king's cruelty. The fields of Ulster are silent, its defenders writhing in their halls, all that is except for one. Chulainn, at this point still a youth of 17, is exempt from the curse, perhaps due to his divine heritage as the son of the god Lug. And so, the defense of a kingdom falls to a single teenager, but this is no ordinary boy. Chulainn's strategy is a masterclass in asymmetric warfare. He does not confront the massive army head-on. Instead, he uses the ancient, ritualized rite of single combat at a ford. He leverages his superhuman speed and knowledge of the terrain to harass Medebe's advancing forces, challenging them to send their greatest champions to face him one by one at various river crossings. Each day, he picks off another hero using his terrifying arsenal of feats. His salmon leap allows him to jump over the shield walls of entire battalions. His thunder feat makes the very ground shake with his martial prowess, and then there is his spear, the Gi-Bolg. This was not a simple throwing spear, it was a barbed, horrific weapon that was cast with the foot. Upon entering a body, its barbs would spread out, shredding a warrior's insides and making the wound impossible to survive or remove. The duels are not just fights, they are brutal, intimate executions. He beheads his opponents and often mounts their heads on stones as a grim warning to the army that dares to look upon them. But the most terrifying aspect of his defense is the Ryostrad, his warp spasm. When his fury peaks, Chulainn undergoes a monstrous physical transformation that is described in grotesque, unforgettable detail. His body contorts violently, with one eye receding deep into his skull and the other bulging out onto his cheek. His mouth stretches to his ears, spewing sparks of fire and blood. His sinews and tendons writhe around his bones like ropes, and every hair on his body stands on end, each tip gleaming with a droplet of blood or a ball of fire. He becomes a living, breathing whirlwind of destruction, a spectacle so horrifying that it paralyzes armies with fear. This is not a controlled power. It is a chaotic, otherworldly force that threatens to consume the hero himself, a visual representation of the primal, untamed violence that underpins the Celtic heroic ideal. Amid this carnage, another powerful, supernatural force takes an active interest in the conflict, the Morrigan. She is not a single goddess but a triple figure, a phantom queen embodying war, fate, and sovereignty. She is often seen as a trio of sisters, the Morrigan, Bodibee, and Macha, or as a shapeshifter who can appear as a beautiful young woman, a powerful warrior, or a carrion crow. She appears to Chulainn, offering him her love and with it her aid in the coming battles. But Chulainn, arrogant and focused solely on his own glory, rebuffs her. Enraged by this rejection, the Morrigan vows to actively work against him. She becomes his supernatural nemesis, interfering in his fights. She appears as an eel to trip him in a river, as a she-wolf to stampede cattle against him, and as a red heifer to lead the enemy. In each form, Chulainn wounds her, but she always escapes, her power ensuring that his victories are never clean, and his struggles are amplified by her divine spite. Her involvement elevates the Tain from a simple military conflict to a cosmic struggle where the very forces of fate and the land itself are arrayed against the hero. For storyboards, imagine the sheer cinematic potential of these scenes. The opening could be a wide shot of Medebe and Aelil in their torch-lit hall, their faces tense as they tally their wealth, the camera focusing on the majestic white bull in its pen. Then cut to the wide, empty plains of Ulster, a single, adolescent figure standing silhouetted at a river ford, waiting. The battle sequences would be a visceral blend of brutal, close-quarters combat and surreal body horror. Picture the moment Chulainn's Ryostrad begins, the camera could shudder and distort. the sound design filling with the sickening crunch of bones and the roar of fire as his body contorts. His duel with his foster brother Ferdiad is a 3-day epic in itself, a heartbreaking sequence where the two friends, bound by deep affection, are forced to fight to the death, their final embrace as Ferdiad dies being one of the most emotionally devastating moments in the cycle. The psychological depth here is immense. Chulainn is a hero slowly being isolated and dehumanized by his own power. He is a boy forced to become a monster to save his people, and the cost is his humanity. Medb is a queen whose ambition is so vast it blinds her to the mountains of corpses piling up for the sake of her pride. The conflict ultimately concludes not with a grand, final battle between armies, but with the beasts at the heart of the dispute. The Don Quixote is successfully taken to Connacht, but the story does not end there. The two bulls, embodiments of the kingdom's power and pride, sense each other and engage in a titanic, earth-shaking fight that ranges across the entire island. They gore and trample each other, tearing up the landscape in their fury. The brown bull of Cooley eventually emerges victorious, goring the white-horned bull to death and scattering its remains across the Irish countryside. But the victory is utterly hollow. The Don Quixote, wounded and driven mad, staggers back toward its home in Ulster, its great heart bursting as it crosses the border. The two magnificent creatures, the catalysts for a war that cost thousands of lives, are both dead. The land is scarred, the armies are decimated, and Medb's quest for an equal symbol of power has ended in absolute pointless ruin. The Tainbo Quixote thus stands as a profound and tragic epic, a stark reminder that wars born from pride and the pursuit of symbols often consume the very things they were meant to acquire, leaving only loss and desolation in their wake. From the rugged, elemental world of Chulainn, we step into a realm that feels at once more familiar and yet more consciously magical, a world of shimmering castles, chivalrous knights, and a promise of a perfect kingdom that was always just out of reach. This is the world of King Arthur, a legend so deeply woven into the fabric of Western culture that it's often hard to separate the historical kernel from the mountain of myth that has grown around it. Unlike the myths rooted in a single culture or text, the Arthurian legend is a sprawling, living tapestry, constantly rewoven over centuries, blending scraps of possible history with Celtic mythology, French romance, and Christian symbolism into one of the most enduring and adaptable stories ever told. At its heart lies a potent question: what if a truly good and just king could unite a land, creating a golden age of peace and honor? This dream of Camelot has captivated imaginations for over 1,000 years. The legend begins not with grandeur but with chaos. After the Romans withdrew from Britain, the island was plunged into a dark age of warring petty kings and invading Saxon armies. It is in this fractured landscape that the wizard Merlin engineers the birth of the future king. Using his magic, he helps the mighty other Pendragon secretly enter the fortress of Tintagel to lie with Igraine, the wife of his enemy, the Duke of Cornwall. From this union of deception and destiny, Arthur is born. To protect him, Merlin has the infant whisked away and raised in obscurity by the noble knight Sir Ector, unaware of his royal blood. Arthur grows up as a humble squire to his foster brother Kay. The pivotal moment that reveals his destiny is one of the most iconic scenes in all of literature. After the death of Uther, there is no clear heir, but a miracle appears in London. A great stone with an anvil set atop it, and thrust deep into that anvil a splendid sword. Inscribed on it are the words that whoever could pull the sword from the stone is the true born king of all Britain. Lords and knights from across the land try and fail. The young Arthur, having forgotten his own sword for a tournament, runs to the churchyard and, thinking only of solving a practical problem, draws the sword from the stone with effortless ease. The initial disbelief gives way to repeated public demonstrations and finally acceptance. This is not a test of raw strength, but of divine right and inherent worthiness. The boy who pulled the sword from the stone is crowned, and he begins his life's work to unite the warring kingdoms of Britain and drive back the Saxon invaders. His greatest symbol of this new, unified order is his court, the fabled Camelot. More than just a castle, Camelot represents an ideal, a beacon of justice, culture, and civilized order in a dark world. At its heart is the Round Table, a concept introduced by the French poet Chrétien de Troyes and later expanded into one of the legend's most powerful symbols. This was no ordinary table with a head and foot where men might squabble for precedence. The Round Table was a perfect circle, signifying that all who sat there were equal in honor and status, united in service to their king and a shared code of chivalry. Arthur gathered the greatest knights in the land: Lancelot, Gawain, Percival, Galahad, and many others, and their adventures or quests became the primary engine of the stories. These were not just military campaigns, they were journeys of personal virtue and spiritual testing, where knights battled giants, rescued damsels, and confronted magical enchantments, all in the name of upholding the ideals of Camelot. But no ideal can exist without its guardians and its temptations, and the Arthurian world is populated by some of the most powerful magical figures in all of mythology. Foremost among them is Merlin, the architect of the kingdom itself. He is a figure of immense and mysterious power, a prophet who can see the future, a shapeshifter, and a counselor who guides the young Arthur. His magic is not the wild, chaotic force of the Celtic otherworld, but a more studied, almost scientific power drawn from the deep knowledge of the earth and the stars. His tragic flaw is his doomed love for the Lady of the Lake, Nimue, to whom he teaches all his secrets, only for her to use that very knowledge to magically imprison him forever in a cave or a tower of air, removing his guiding wisdom from the world at the very time Arthur needs it most. The Lady of the Lake herself is another pivotal enchantress, a ruler of a mysterious, watery realm of Avalon. She is the one who presents Arthur with his second great sword, Excalibur. This is not the sword from the stone, but a weapon of even greater power and significance. Given to him after the sword from the stone was broken in a fight against King Pellinore, Excalibur is unbreakable, and its scabbard possesses the even more valuable magic of preventing its wearer from losing any blood, making Arthur nearly invincible in battle. The Lady of the Lake is both a bestower of great gifts and a final arbiter of fate, for when Arthur lies mortally wounded, it is to her that the sword must be returned, with Sir Bedivere throwing it back into the water where a hand rises to catch it and draw it beneath the waves. The greatest and most spiritual of all the quests undertaken by the Knights of the Round Table is the search for the Holy Grail. This quest, heavily infused with Christian symbolism by later writers, transforms the legend from a purely chivalric romance into a spiritual allegory. The Grail is generally depicted as the cup used by Christ at the Last Supper, later brought to Britain by Joseph of Arimathea. It is not merely a physical object, but a symbol of divine grace, a vessel that can provide endless sustenance and healing. The Grail appears in a vision at Camelot, floating in a beam of celestial light, and its appearance calls the knights to a new, higher purpose. But the Grail quest is not for everyone. It is a test of purity of heart, and it reveals the spiritual flaws festering within the court. Most of the knights fail, distracted by worldly adventures or their own sins. The worldly and consummate knight, Sir Lancelot, is forbidden from even fully seeing the Grail because of his adulterous love for Arthur's queen, Guinevere. The quest is ultimately achieved by only 3 knights: the pure Sir Galahad, Lancelot's son, who is so perfect he is allowed to gaze into the Grail's mysteries and whose soul is then carried to heaven, the honest Sir Percival, and the steadfast Sir Bors. The successful completion of the quest, however, does not save Camelot. In a cruel irony, this spiritual triumph drains the court of its best knights and highlights the moral compromises of those who remain, accelerating the kingdom's downfall. That downfall is rooted in a very human tragedy, the forbidden love between Queen Guinevere and Arthur's greatest knight, Sir Lancelot. This is not a simple tale of betrayal, it is a complex web of conflicting loyalties. Arthur loves both his wife and his best friend, and the discovery of their affair shatters the very bonds of trust and fellowship that the Round Table was built upon. The noble knight Gawain, whose brothers are accidentally killed by Lancelot during the Queen's rescue, becomes consumed by a blood feud, forcing Arthur to march against his own greatest knight. This civil war, born from a broken heart, weakens the kingdom at its core. Into this power vacuum steps the ultimate agent of destruction, Mordred, often portrayed as Arthur's illegitimate son or nephew, born of an unknowing liaison with his half-sister Morgause. Seizing the throne while Arthur is away at war, Mordred forces the final, cataclysmic confrontation on the field of Camlan. It is a battle of utter devastation where the last of the Round Table is destroyed. Arthur and Mordred meet in the center of the carnage and run each other through. The legend concludes not with a clear death but with a mystery and a promise. The mortally wounded Arthur is placed on a barge by several mourning queens, including the Lady of the Lake, and taken to the mystical Isle of Avalon to be healed of his wounds. His final resting place is unknown, fueling the enduring belief that he is not truly dead but sleeping, waiting for the day when Britain faces its greatest peril to return once more. The power of the Arthurian legend lies in this perfect, tragic balance between a glorious, attainable dream and the inevitable human flaws that bring it crashing down, a story that continues to remind us of the fragile beauty of our highest ideals. Yet for all the glory and fellowship of Camelot, the Round Table's ultimate purpose was not to be found in tournaments or in driving back Saxon invaders. Its true, final test was a spiritual one, a call that came not from a besieged castle, but from a vision that pierced the very fabric of reality. This is the quest for the Holy Grail, the spiritual climax of the Arthurian legend, a pursuit so pure and demanding that it would ultimately reveal the hidden flaws within the court and scatter the very fellowship that sought it. The Grail itself is an object of profound mystery, its origins a palimpsest of older myths overlaid with Christian devotion. In its most famous incarnation, it is the chalice used by Christ at the Last Supper, the very cup that caught his blood at the crucifixion, brought to Britain by Joseph of Arimathea. This vessel radiates divine grace, capable of providing endless sustenance, profound healing, and a direct connection to the divine. Yet its roots delve deeper into the pre-Christian soil of Celtic Britain, where it echoes the magical cauldrons of Welsh myth, like the cauldron of Dirnach that could resurrect the dead or the cauldron of the Dagda from which no company ever went away unsatisfied. It is this fusion of ideas, the pagan cauldron of plenty and the Christian relic of ultimate sacrifice, that gives the Grail its unique power, representing humanity's eternal longing for a source of spiritual and physical nourishment that can heal a wounded world. That wound is made literal in the legend through the concept of the wasteland. In the versions told by Chrétien de Troyes and later writers, the land itself has become sick, its fields barren and its rivers dry, a direct reflection of the spiritual malady of its ruler, the Fisher King. The king suffers from a grievous wound, often in his thigh, a symbol of impotence and decay, and his kingdom languishes under a curse. The healing of the land is inextricably linked to the Grail, and the success of the quest hinges on a knight asking the correct, compassionate question upon entering the Grail castle. This setting, the castle of Carbonic or Corbenic, is a place of profound enchantment, often described as existing in a liminal space, appearing and disappearing, visible only to those who are spiritually prepared. Within its halls, the Grail procession unfolds. Attendants carry sacred relics past the seated knights, a bleeding lance, said to be the spear of Longinus that pierced Christ's side, silver candelabras, and finally the Grail itself, shimmering with an unearthly light, floating through the air, filling the hall with divine fragrance and providing a feast. The failure of most knights is not one of courage, but of perception and empathy. They witness this miracle, but bound by the strict rules of chivalric etiquette that forbid asking impertinent questions, they remain silent. They fail to ask, "Whom does the grail serve?" or "What ails thee, uncle?" This silence is a metaphor for a spirituality that observes ritual without engaging the heart, that sees suffering but does not inquire into its cause. The kingdom remains a wasteland because of this failure of simple, compassionate connection. It is this call that echoes through the halls of Camelot one Pentecost, when a vision of the Grail, veiled in white samite and radiating a light that outshines the sun, appears before the assembled knights of the Round Table. It bestows a profound sense of peace and fulfillment upon all present, but then vanishes, leaving an unquenchable longing in its wake. The knights, in a surge of religious fervor, immediately vow to embark on a quest to find this holy vessel and bring it back to Camelot. King Arthur, however, is not filled with joy, but with a deep and prescient sorrow. He understands that this is not a quest for earthly glory. It is a journey that will test the very soul of his fellowship. He knows that the quest will scatter his knights across the world, and that many will never return, prophesying the beginning of the end of the golden age of Camelot. His fears are well-founded, for the Grail quest becomes a mirror, reflecting the inner state of each knight who seeks it. Their individual journeys expose the spectrum of human spirituality, from flawless purity to tortured sin. At one end of this spectrum stands Sir Galahad, the Knight of the Virgin, the son of Sir Lancelot and Elaine of Corbenic. His entire life is orchestrated for this single purpose. He is the perfect knight, so pure in heart and body that he is the only one deemed worthy to sit in the Siege Perilous, a seat at the Round Table left vacant and enchanted to kill any unworthy occupant. Galahad is not so much a character as an archetype of divine grace made manifest. His adventures on the quest are less about struggle and more about inevitable fulfillment. He is the knight who heals the maimed king by simply asking the healing question, whose touch mends broken weapons, and who is ultimately chosen above all others to achieve the Grail. In the culminating vision, Galahad, accompanied by the equally pure Sir Bors and the earnest Sir Percival, is taken to the mystical city of Sagas. There, in a ceremony presided over by Joseph of Arimathea himself, Galahad is allowed to gaze directly into the mysteries of the Grail. The experience is so overwhelming, so fundamentally beyond the mortal plane, that he prays for death immediately afterward, and his soul is carried to heaven by a host of angels. His quest is one of ascension, not return, demonstrating that the highest spiritual attainment is ultimately incompatible with life in the fallen world. In stark contrast to his son's flawless journey stands the tragedy of Sir Lancelot, the greatest knight in the world, yet tragically flawed. Lancelot's quest is a story of near misses and agonizing glimpses of grace, forever barred from him by his adulterous love for Queen Guinevere. He possesses the martial skill, the courage, and even the deep devotional faith to come closer to the Grail than any other knight save the three pure ones. In one poignant episode, after years of searching, he finally stumbles upon the Grail castle, the doors of which open magically for him. He witnesses the Grail procession, but when the moment comes, he is struck with a spiritual catalepsy, a divine paralysis. He is unable to rise, to speak, or to ask the healing question. He then falls into a deep, enchanted sleep for 24 days, a symbol of his spiritual blindness. He is later told by a hermit that his great sin, his fixed intent on the queen, has made him unworthy despite his prowess. For Lancelot, the Grail is a reminder not of what he can achieve, but of what his human weakness has cost him. He is granted a later vision of the Grail, but only from a distance, and he is explicitly forbidden from entering the room where it resides. His is a path of heartbreaking spiritual yearning, a testament to the idea that even the mightiest are brought low by the demands of divine purity. Between these two poles of perfection and doomed passion walks Sir Percival, perhaps the most relatable of the Grail seekers. In the earliest stories, he is the primary hero, a naive and humble knight whose journey is one of growth and learning. Percival begins his life in innocence, raised by his mother in a forest, sheltered from the ways of knights and the world. His initial ignorance is both his weakness and his strength. When he first chances upon the Grail castle, he witnesses the procession and the suffering Fisher King. But remembering a mentor's advice to not talk too much, he remains silent and goes to bed. He wakes to find the castle empty and the land still a wasteland, realizing his catastrophic failure. His subsequent quest is one of atonement and spiritual education. He learns through failure, through guidance from holy hermits who interpret his visions, and through the hard lessons of the road. He is tempted, he fights his own family members, and he slowly sheds his naivete for a deeper, hard-won wisdom. His path shows that the quest is not solely for the born saint like Galahad, but also for the earnest, flawed individual willing to learn from their mistakes and persevere in faith. It is this humility and capacity for growth that ultimately earns him a place alongside Galahad and Bors at the final revelation in Sagas. The quest for the Holy Grail, therefore, stands as the sublime and somber heart of the Arthurian cycle. It elevates the knightly ideal from martial prowess to spiritual knighthood, suggesting that the hardest battles are fought within the soul. Its tragic irony is that in seeking the ultimate source of healing, the Knights of the Round Table expose the fractures in their own fellowship, setting the stage for the earthly tragedies of betrayal and civil war that would ultimately bring the dream of Camelot crashing down. Leaving the mystical Isles of Avalon behind, we travel east across deserts and mountain ranges to the heart of a civilization whose artistic and intellectual achievements would light up the medieval world. We arrive in Persia, a land of immense empires and a culture of breathtaking sophistication, and we encounter a literary monument so vast and so foundational that it is quite literally known as the Book of Kings. This is the Shahnameh, the life's work of the poet Ferdowsi, composed around the year 1000. To call it an epic is to understate its role. It is the soul of Iran, a chronicle of 50 generations of myth, legend, and history, from the dawn of creation to the fall of the Sasanian Empire to the Arab conquest in the 7th century. For context, imagine if a single poet had attempted to weave together the Book of Genesis, the legends of Hercules, the history of the Roman Caesars, and the fall of Constantinople into one continuous, soaring narrative poem, all to preserve the very essence of a national identity. That was Ferdowsi's colossal undertaking, a project he toiled over for 30 years, creating a work that is roughly 7 times the length of Homer's Iliad. The Shahnameh is masterfully structured into 3 distinct ages, each with its own tone and purpose, tracing the evolution of Persian kingship and society. It begins with the mythical age, a time of primordial battles between the forces of good and evil, order and chaos. This is where we witness the foundation of civilization itself by the very first Shahs or kings. The very first is Kiyumaz, who rules over a peaceful, almost Edenic world, teaching his people to make clothing from leopard skins. But this golden age is shattered with the rise of the devil, Ahriman, and his monstrous son, the Black Demon. This establishes the central, Zoroastrian-inspired conflict that underpins the entire epic, the cosmic struggle between the divine light of order, represented by the supreme god Ahura Mazda and his righteous kings, and the destructive darkness of deceit and chaos. The most fascinating figure of this era is Jamshid, a Shah who begins as a radiantly perfect ruler, a benevolent inventor king who teaches his people architecture, medicine, and shipbuilding, and who creates the glorious festival of Nowruz, the Persian New Year, which is still celebrated today. But his immense power corrupts him. He grows arrogant, proclaiming himself a god, and the divine glory, the Far, departs from him. His kingdom collapses into tyranny and is eventually overthrown by the serpent king Zahak, a usurper with snakes growing from his shoulders that must be fed with the brains of 2 young men each day. The mythical age establishes the core political philosophy of the Shahnameh, that kingship is a sacred trust from God, contingent upon justice, humility, and wisdom. A king who rules unjustly, like the fallen Jamshid, loses his divine right to rule and plunges the land into suffering. From this foundational myth, we transition into the epic's magnificent and emotionally charged heart, the heroic age. This is the domain of the great paladins, the champions who defend Iran from its perennial enemies, most notably the land of Turan. And towering above them all is the figure of Rostam, the ultimate Persian hero, born of a noble line and blessed with the strength of 10 elephants. He is a figure of colossal, almost superhuman prowess, but he is also deeply human, bound by a strict code of honor and loyalty to the throne of Iran. His life is a tapestry of incredible adventures, many of which feel like they could be drawn from the most thrilling fantasy novels. He undertakes 7 heroic trials or Haft Khan to rescue his captured king, a journey that sees him slay a dragon, defeat a demon, and overcome a powerful sorceress. The imagery associated with Rostam is iconic. His massive, knotted club, his loyal and intelligent horse Raksh, and the leopard skin tunic he wears into battle. Yet, for all his glorious exploits, Rostam's most enduring and heartbreaking story is a profoundly personal tragedy, one that stands as one of the most powerful narratives of mistaken identity and paternal fate in all of world literature. This is the tale of Rostam and his son, Sohrab. The story begins with Rostam during his travels falling in love with and marrying the princess Tamineh. He leaves her, giving her a single, bejeweled armband or dastband to give to the child she expects, telling her that if it is a son, he is to bind the armband to the boy's arm as a token of his lineage. Sohrab is born and grows with astonishing speed into a warrior of unparalleled might, his only goal to find his legendary father and together overthrow the unjust Shah of Iran and place Rostam on the throne. Meanwhile, Rostam, having returned to Iran, has no knowledge of his son's existence or his incredible prowess. The stage is set for a catastrophe. Sohrab leads the Turanian army against Iran, and the 2 greatest warriors of the age, father and son, find themselves on opposing sides of the battlefield. They meet in single combat, but neither knows the identity of the other. The descriptions of their fight are agonizing in their detail, stretching over 3 long days. They wrestle like titans, their strength so evenly matched that the very earth trembles. There are moments of strange, unspoken recognition. Rostam feels a peculiar tenderness for the young champion. Sohrab is haunted by the thought that this could be the father he has sought his entire life. At one point, Sohrab gains the upper hand and is about to deliver a killing blow, but Rostam, using a trick of his own people, tells him that a true hero never kills on the first victory, that honor demands a second chance. Sohrab, young and noble, believes him and lets him go. The next day, fate intervenes cruelly. Rostam, thrown to the ground and fearing for his life, plunges his dagger into Sohrab's side. As the young warrior lies dying, he speaks of his quest for his father, Rostam, and reveals the armband that was to be the token of his identity. He tells Rostam that his father will avenge him. The moment of realization is one of shattering horror. Rostam tears his own clothes, screams in anguish, and begs the Shah for a magical elixir that could save his son's life. But the Shah, fearful that if Sohrab lives, Rostam and his invincible son would unite and overthrow him, refuses to send it. Rostam is left cradling his dying son, who offers him a final, heartbreaking consolation. "I came like thunder, I go like the wind." The tragedy of Rostam and Sohrab is not just a personal loss, it is a national one. In killing his own son, Rostam has unwittingly destroyed Iran's future, a victim of political intrigue and the cruel mechanics of a fate that he himself could not outwit. Finally, the epic moves into its third section, the historical age, which chronicles the reigns of the actual Sasanian emperors, blending fact with legend. Here, the tone shifts from the mythic and heroic to a more sober, chronicle-like narrative of royal courts, battles, and romances. We encounter figures like the mighty Boromir, a king as famous for his hunting prowess as his justice, and the tragic love story of Khosrow and Shirin, a tale of a king and a princess whose romance is thwarted by circumstance and a jealous rival, the craftsman Farhad. This section serves as a bridge connecting the legendary past to the historical memory of a glorious Persian empire. The Shahnameh concludes not with a mythic cataclysm like Ragnarok, but with a historical one, the Arab conquest of Persia in the 7th century. Ferdowsi writes of the fall of the last Sasanian king, Yazdijerd III, and the end of the ancient Zoroastrian order. The final lines are elegiac, mourning the passing of the old world while carefully preserving its memory for the future. This was in fact Ferdowsi's supreme achievement. He composed the Shahnameh at a time when the Persian language was being supplanted by Arabic as the language of court and literature. By choosing to write his epic not in Arabic, but in pure, elegant Persian, Ferdowsi single-handedly resurrected and preserved the Persian language, cementing its vocabulary and grammar for centuries to come. He gave his people a cultural anchor, a book of kings that reminded them of who they were long before their conquest, a treasury of stories, heroes, and values that would ensure the survival of the Persian spirit through countless upheavals. The Shahnameh is more than a story. It is the vessel of a civilization, a testament to the power of a poet's pen to defy oblivion itself. But to understand a story of a sacred quest, we must first understand the rebel who turned it into a cosmic adventure, a being whose ambition was so vast he challenged heaven itself. We now journey from the tragic battlefields of Persia to the mystical, cloud-wreathed peaks and heavenly bureaucracies of ancient China, with one of the most beloved and fantastical stories ever told, The Journey to the West. Attributed to the poet Wu Cheng'an in the 16th century, this novel is one of the 4 great classical novels of Chinese literature, a sprawling, hilarious, and deeply spiritual epic that has captivated audiences for centuries. On its surface, it recounts the perilous 17-year pilgrimage of the historical Buddhist monk Xuanzang, who traveled from China to India in the 7th century to retrieve authentic Buddhist scriptures or sutras. But this historical framework is merely the spine for a riotous, magical, and profoundly imaginative tale, one where the quest is almost secondary to the antics and growth of the monk's supernatural bodyguards, a divine protection detail assigned by the Bodhisattva Guanyin. And at the forefront of this motley crew is one of the most charismatic and anarchic figures in all of world mythology, Sun Wukong, the Monkey King. His origin story is as legendary as his ego. He was not born, but erupted, born from a stone egg fashioned by the primal forces of heaven and earth, nourished by the wind. This cosmic rock had been absorbing the energy of the sun and moon for ages, and from it sprang a stone monkey already ablaze with life and potential. He quickly proves his intelligence and courage to the other monkeys of the mountain of flowers and fruit, becoming their king by discovering the mythical water curtain cave, a paradise behind a great waterfall. But a deep existential dread soon grips him, the fear of death. Determined to conquer his own mortality, he embarks on a quest, sailing across oceans to find a transcendent master who can teach him the secrets of immortality. He finds the patriarch Subhuti, a Taoist sage, who teaches him the 72 earthly transformations, the ability to shapeshift into 72 different forms, from a tiny insect to a towering giant, and the cloud somersault, a form of flight that allows him to traverse 108,000 li with a single leap, a distance that could cross entire continents. Armed with this incredible power, his first act upon returning home is to venture into the undersea palace of the Dragon King and demand a weapon worthy of his might. He tries one celestial weapon after another, finding them all too light, until he is guided to a magical iron pillar that once anchored the Milky Way itself. This pillar, the Rui Jingu Bang, obeys his command, shrinking to the size of a needle to be stored behind his ear or expanding to a colossal pillar that can strike down armies. This single act, stealing a treasure from the Dragon Kings, is just the beginning of his audacious rebellion. Feeling his power deserves recognition, Sun Wukong gets himself a minor post in the celestial bureaucracy of heaven, the Jade Emperor's domain. But when he discovers his title, Protector of the Horses, is a mere stable hand, his pride is fatally wounded. He rebels, declaring himself the great sage equal to heaven, and proceeds to wage a one-monkey war against the entire heavenly host. The celestial army, with all its generals and guards, is helpless against him. He fights his way through their finest warriors, his shape-shifting allowing him to create countless clones from his own hairs, and his invincibility making him immune to their weapons. He is a force of pure, untamed chaos, consuming the peaches of immortality, stealing the pills of longevity from Laozi, the supreme Taoist deity, and essentially making himself indestructible. It is only through the direct intervention of the Buddha himself that Sun Wukong is finally subdued. The Buddha listens to the Monkey King's boasts and challenges him to a simple wager. If Sun Wukong can leap out of the Buddha's palm with his cloud somersault, he will be made the ruler of heaven. Confident in his power, Sun Wukong agrees. He soars for what seems like an eternity, arriving at what he thinks are 5 pillars at the edge of the universe, where he urinates to mark his territory. He then somersaults back, only to find he never left the Buddha's hand. The pillars were the Buddha's own fingers. For his hubris, the Buddha pins him beneath a mountain, where he is imprisoned for 500 years, crushed by the weight of stone and his own immense pride. This is where the real journey begins. The Bodhisattva Guanyin, a figure of infinite compassion, offers him a path to redemption. He can atone for his sins by protecting the pious monk Chulainn on his sacred pilgrimage to the Western Paradise to retrieve the sutras. Reluctantly, the Monkey King agrees, and a magical golden headband is placed on his head, which Chulainn can tighten with a simple chant, causing excruciating pain and ensuring the rebellious monkey's obedience. The novel's true charm unfolds on the road west, as this divine odd couple is joined by other flawed disciples seeking redemption. There is Zhu Beiji, the pig of the 8 prohibitions, a former celestial marshal who was banished to Earth for drunkenly harassing a moon goddess and was reincarnated into the body of a half-man, half-pig. He is gluttonous, lazy, and lecherous, constantly causing trouble and dreaming of returning to his comfortable life. Then there is Sha Wujing, the Sand-Bearer, a former celestial curtain general who was exiled for breaking a heavenly crystal cup and now resides in a river, a quiet but formidable warrior burdened by his own past mistakes. Finally, there is the White Dragon Horse, a prince transformed into a steed as punishment for burning his father's pearls. Together, they form a dysfunctional, bickering, yet ultimately devoted family, their personal flaws and comedic interactions providing a stark contrast to the solemnity of their holy mission. The journey itself is a seemingly endless parade of supernatural perils. Almost every mountain pass, every dark forest, and every misty river is home to a demon or monster who has heard a terrifyingly delicious rumor. Consuming the flesh of the monk Chulainn will grant immortality. This premise sets up the novel's repetitive yet endlessly inventive structure. The troupe arrives in a new region, a demon king, often a fallen celestial being or a transformed animal spirit, captures the naive and trusting Chulainn, and his disciples must devise a plan to rescue him. This is where Sun Wukong's brilliance truly shines. He is far more than a mere brawler. He is a master strategist and trickster. His 72 transformations are his greatest tool. To infiltrate a demon's fortress, he might turn into a tiny fly to eavesdrop on their plans, or transform into the likeness of a demon's relative to deceive them. He uses his cloud somersault to speed to heaven and interrogate the celestial bureaucrats, often discovering that the monster plaguing them is actually a disobedient pet or mount of a high god who accidentally let it escape to the mortal realm. The battles are spectacular, chaotic affairs. Sun Wukong, with his staff, fights demons who wield magical fans that can create hurricane winds or flasks that can suck the entire world inside them. He battles with fire, water, and illusions, his shape-shifting allowing for duels where combatants constantly change form to gain an upper hand, a bird to chase a snake, a panther to stalk a deer. The visual potential here is limitless, a kaleidoscope of mythological creatures and magical warfare that could be rendered in the vibrant, kinetic style of traditional Chinese opera, with its elaborate costumes and acrobatic combat, or in the lush, detailed brushwork of classical Chinese paintings and woodblock prints. Yet beneath the slapstick and the spectacle lies a profound spiritual allegory. The pilgrimage is an external journey that mirrors an internal one. The monk Xuanzang, or Tang Sanzang as he is often called, represents fallible human faith. He is compassionate but easily frightened and deceived, constantly needing to be saved by his more powerful disciples. Sun Wukong represents the untamed human mind, brilliant, powerful, but rebellious and prone to arrogance, which must be disciplined and focused by the headband of spiritual practice. Zhu Beiji embodies raw physical desire and attachment, while Sha Wujing represents a quiet, steadfast perseverance. Together, they symbolize the complete human being striving for enlightenment, battling their own inner demons of pride, desire, and doubt on the path toward wisdom. They face 81 preordained calamities, a number signifying the trials one must overcome to achieve perfection in Buddhist thought. After 14 years and countless adventures, they finally reach their destination, the Thunder Monastery in the Western Paradise. They receive the sacred sutras, but in a final, humorous test of their attachment, they are given blank scrolls, having failed to offer a proper bribe. Once they return with the true scriptures, they achieve their ultimate reward, enlightenment and Buddhahood. Sun Wukong, the rebellious monkey who once declared war on heaven, is finally granted the title he always craved, the victorious fighting Buddha, a testament to his complete transformation. The journey to the West endures because it is everything at once, a hilarious comedy, a breathtaking fantasy, a thrilling adventure, and a deep spiritual roadmap, all wrapped up in the unforgettable, irrepressible personality of a monkey who dared to challenge the cosmos and, in doing so, found his true self. From the celestial bureaucracies of China, we now journey across the vast Pacific Ocean to the steamy, lush rainforests of Mesoamerica, where the ancient Maya built towering pyramids that scraped the sky and developed a cosmology of breathtaking complexity. Here, in a world of jaguars, ceiba trees, and swirling obsidian smoke, we find our next epic, a foundational text that serves as the soul of an entire civilization, the Popol Vuh. Often referred to as the Mayan Bible, this is not a single, dusty book, but a living narrative, a collection of creation stories, histories, and epic adventures that were painstakingly transcribed into the Roman alphabet in the 16th century by members of the Kayich Maya nobility, preserving a sacred oral tradition that had survived for centuries. The Popol Vuh opens not with a single deity speaking the world into being, but with a vast primordial stillness. There is only the placid sea and the empty sky, and hovering over the water, the sovereign plumed serpent, the heart of sky, and a council of other creator gods. But these gods are not content with silence. They are artists and thinkers, and they wish to be praised, to be recognized. Their first attempt at creation is the animals. They fashion the deer, the birds, the jaguars, and the snakes, but these creatures can only squawk, hiss, and howl. They cannot speak the names of their creators, they cannot worship. Displeased, the gods condemn the animals to live in the bushes and thickets, to be eaten, establishing the hierarchical order of the world. So the gods try again. This time they form a being from mud. This mudman can speak, but its words are slurred and meaningless. It simply crumbles apart, dissolving back into the earth. It has no mind, no soul, and no memory of its makers. The third attempt is more ingenious. They craft people from wood. These wooden mannequins look human. They walk and talk, and they even reproduce. But they have no blood, no hearts, and no gratitude. They are empty vessels, forgetting the gods who made them. In their divine fury, the gods send a great flood to wipe them out, followed by a rain of sticky resin from the sky. And finally, their own pots, grinding stones, and animals rise up against them in a horrific, surreal rebellion. The few survivors are said to have become the monkeys in the trees, a lingering, chattering reminder of a failed creation. After this catastrophic failure, the narrative shifts from the genesis of humanity to the epic that will ultimately make it possible. We are introduced to a pair of divine ball players, 1 Hunahpu and 7 Hunahpu, who spend their days playing the sacred ball game on a court that echoes with the sound of their hip strikes. The noise of their game infuriates the sinister lords of the underworld, Xibalba. This is not a fiery hell, but a cold, dark, and damp place of rot and fear, ruled by a host of malevolent deities with names like 1 Death and 7 Death, Pus Master and Jaundice Master. They send a sinister owl messenger to summon the brothers to the underworld, luring them with a challenge to a ball game. The journey to Xibalba is a descent into a nightmare. The brothers must cross rivers of blood and pus and pass through houses of darkness, cold jaguars, and razor-sharp blades, each a deadly trap set by the Xibalbans. They fail every test and are ultimately tricked and sacrificed by the Lords of Death. The head of 1 Hunahpu is cut off and placed in the fork of a dead calabash tree as a warning. But in a twist of miraculous life, the skull spits into the hand of a daughter of one of the Death Lords, a maiden named Blood Moon, magically impregnating her. Banished from the underworld for her transgression, she ascends to the surface world to live with the mother of the slain brothers. It is here that she gives birth to the true heroes of the Popol Vuh, the hero twins Hunahpu and Xbalanque. From their very inception, the twins are different. They are not merely ball players, they are divine tricksters, masters of transformation and strategy. They grow up facing adversity, even from their own half-brothers, 1 monkey and 1 artisan, who are jealous and treat them cruelly. The twins, using their magical powers, turn their brothers into the first howler monkeys, forever cursing them to the trees, establishing yet another facet of the natural world through their actions. But their true destiny calls from the underworld. The Lords of Xibalba, angered once more by the sound of a ball game from the surface, summon the twins just as they had their father and uncle. This time, however, the heroes are prepared. They understand the deceptive nature of Xibalba. Before they even begin their descent, they arrange for their own resurrection by planting an ear of maize in their grandmother's house, a powerful symbol of the life that will spring from their sacrifice. Their journey through the underworld is a masterclass in psychological warfare. They do not fall for the Xibalbans' initial tricks, like the disguised wooden figures meant to be insulted. When faced with the deadly houses of Xibalba, they do not succumb. In the House of Gloom, they use a firefly to mimic a lit cigar, fooling the guards. In the House of Cold, they huddle together for warmth and survive. In the House of Jaguars, they throw bones to the beasts to distract them. And in the House of Fire, they simply walk through unscathed, protected by their own magic. Their cunning infuriates the Lords of Death, who finally challenge them to the ball game. The twins deliberately lose the first game, sacrificing one of their own, Hunahpu, to be beheaded by the Xibalbans. The Death Lords use his head as the ball in the next game, but through a clever ruse, a rabbit is substituted and Hunahpu is restored. The climax of their confrontation is a spectacular performance of deception. The twins pretend to be itinerant magicians, performing miraculous feats for the Death Lords. They burn a house down and restore it. They sacrifice a dog and bring it back to life. Eagerly, the lords of Xibalba demand to see the ultimate trick. They want to be sacrificed and brought back to life. The twins agree. They sacrifice one of the lesser lords but pointedly do not revive him. Then they turn on the two chief lords, one death and seven death. They sacrifice them, and this time they absolutely refuse to bring them back. With the rulers of the underworld destroyed, the twins ascend to the sky, becoming the sun and the moon, bringing light and order to the world for the first time. The defeat of the lords of Xibalba is the pivotal event that makes the final creation of humanity possible. The gods, now with a cleared path, gather in the primordial dawn at a place called Paxil and Kaala. This time they find the perfect substance, yellow and white maize. They grind the maize into meal, and from this sacred dough mixed with water, they fashion the first 4 true human beings. These are the first fathers of the Kayich people. Unlike the mud or wood figures, these maize men are perfect. They have vision and understanding. They can see and know everything from the highest mountains to the deepest foundations of the earth. Their wisdom is so great it actually frightens the gods, who worry that these new beings will become their equals. So, the heart of sky breathes a mist over their eyes, limiting their vision to what is near, creating the human condition as we know it, blessed with intelligence and soul, but no longer omniscient. The Popol Vuh is thus far more than a simple creation myth. It is a profound exploration of the cycles of life, death, and resurrection, mirrored in the agricultural cycle of the maize plant, which must be buried in the earth to be reborn. It explains the world not as a perfect, finished product, but as the result of trial, error, sacrifice, and the heroic, cunning struggle of the divine against the forces of decay and despair. It is the story of how humanity, born from sacred corn, earned its place in a cosmos balanced precariously between the world of the living and the ever-lurking darkness of Xibalba. From the shattered calabash tree and the maize-born fathers of the Popol Vuh, we travel across the Atlantic to a different kind of Genesis story, one born not in the misty realm of gods, but in the sun-scorched savannas and bustling trade routes of 13th century West Africa. Here, history and magic are so intertwined they become one and the same, preserved not in written books, but in the living memory of poets and musicians known as griots. For generations, these master storytellers have held the soul of their people in their songs, and the greatest story they tell is that of the Lion King, the founder of the mighty Mali Empire. This is the epic of Sundiata, a tale where a historical king's life is elevated to the level of myth, a powerful narrative of overcoming disability, exile, and dark sorcery to fulfill a destiny written in the stars long before his birth. Our story begins not with Sundiata, but with a prophecy. The ruler of the small Kangoba kingdom, a Mandinka chief named Ner Magan Konate, receives a divine hunter from the wilderness. This holy man foretells that the king will have a son by an ugly, hunchbacked woman, and that this boy will become the greatest king the world has ever known, a mighty ruler whose name would eclipse all who came before him. Soon after, 2 hunters from the land of Du present the king with just such a woman, Sogolon Keju, describing how they had to conquer a terrifying buffalo spirit that was ravaging their land, and that this woman was the buffalo's human double, the source of its power. Recognizing the fulfillment of the prophecy, King Magan Konate marries Sogolon, and she gives birth to a son, Sundiata, but the child is not the picture of a future hero. He is born weak and physically challenged, unable to walk or even crawl. For years, he simply drags himself along the ground, a subject of pity and cruel mockery from the king's first wife, Sasama Barete, and her own son, Dankaran Tauman, who is destined to be the king's heir. Sundiata's mother, Sogolon, is humiliated and shunned, her son seen as a living refutation of the grand prophecy. This period of his life is a profound lesson in the nature of true strength, a reminder that power is not always born fully formed, but often lies dormant, waiting for the precise moment to awaken. That moment arrives when Sundiata is 7 years old. After yet another insult from Sasamabharate, who had taunted Chulainn by flaunting a fine baobab leaf she had easily plucked for her own healthy son, a deep change comes over the crippled boy. He calls for the heaviest possible iron rod to be brought to him. With the entire court watching, he plants his frail arms on the ground, and with a surge of willpower that seems to shake the very foundations of the palace, he hauls himself upright. The iron rod, meant to be his crutch, bends under his newfound strength. In that single miraculous act he stands, and from that day forward he walks. He transforms from an object of ridicule into a figure of awe, displaying immense strength and charisma, quickly surpassing his older half-brother in every measure of leadership and skill. But just as Sundiata rises, his father dies, and the jealous Sasamabharate maneuvers her son, Dankaran Tauman, onto the throne. Fearful of Sundiata's growing influence and the prophecy that hangs over him, the new king and his mother force Sundiata, his mother Chulainn, and his siblings into exile. This begins a long, arduous period of wandering, a hero's journey that takes them from court to court across West Africa. They face hardship, betrayal, and constant uncertainty, but this exile is not a punishment, it is a crucible. It is during these difficult years that Sundiata learns the landscapes, politics, and peoples of the region, forging the alliances and gaining the worldly experience that will be essential for his future role as a unifier. While he is away, a far greater threat emerges to threaten the very existence of the Mandinka people. The Soso king, Saumayoro Kante, a sorcerer king of unimaginable cruelty and power, conquers Sundiata's homeland. Saumayoro is no ordinary foe. He is a figure of pure, tyrannical evil who skins his enemies alive and uses their skins to adorn his macabre palace. His power comes from dark magic. He possesses a secret chamber filled with the fetishes and skulls of the kings he has defeated, and he is protected by powerful spells that make him invulnerable to conventional weapons. He is a predator who has subjugated all the surrounding kingdoms, imposing his will through terror and occult might. The call to liberation finally comes. A Mandinka delegation, led by Sundiata's own half-brother who now regrets the past, tracks the hero down in his exile in the kingdom of Mema, where he had risen to become a favored general. They beg him to return and free his people from the sorcerer's grip. Sundiata gathers a small army of his loyal followers and the forces granted to him by his allies and begins the march home. The conflict between Sundiata and Saumayoro is therefore not just a political or military struggle. It is a cosmic battle between two different kinds of power. Sundiata's strength lies in his righteousness, his charisma, and his connection to the legitimate, life-affirming forces of the world. Saumayoro's power is drawn from domination, fear, and the perversion of the natural order. Their first military encounter is a disaster for Sundiata. At the Battle of Negaboria, his forces are routed, not by conventional tactics but by Saumayoro's witchcraft. The Sorcerer King appears on the battlefield shrouded in a mystical haze, his weapons unable to harm him, and his very presence sows panic and confusion. Sundiata realizes he cannot defeat this enemy with strength of arms alone. He must fight magic with magic. Here, the epic introduces one of its most fascinating characters, the hunter-magician Bala Faseke. Originally Sundiata's own griot, Bala had been captured by Saumayoro, but he uses his wit and knowledge to insinuate himself into the sorcerer's court. From the inside, he learns the secret of Saumayoro's invincibility. The Soso King's power is contained in a single, vulnerable point, a single, sacred rooster spur located on the roof of his secret chamber. To defeat him, one must strike this talisman with an arrow tipped with a spur from a white rooster. Bala Faseke manages to smuggle this crucial intelligence to Sundiata, turning the griot from a mere storyteller into an active, pivotal agent in the hero's quest. Armed with this knowledge, the stage is set for the final, decisive confrontation at the Battle of Karina. The two vast armies face each other, but the true duel is between the two leaders. As the forces clash, Sundiata, having fashioned the magical arrow, takes aim not at Saumayoro himself, but at the talisman on his person. He lets the arrow fly. It finds its mark, and in that instant, Saumayoro's protective magic shatters. The invincible sorcerer king is suddenly rendered vulnerable, his power draining away. He turns and flees the battlefield in terror and confusion, his army crumbling behind him. Sundiata's victory is total. He pursues the fleeing Saumayoro, who hides in a cave in the Kulakoro Mountains. According to legend, the defeated king was either sealed inside forever or transformed into a stone pillar, a permanent monument to his own hubris and defeat. With the tyrant overthrown, Sundiata's true work begins. He does not simply seize power for himself. He summons all the chiefs and kings of the conquered territories to a great assembly, the Jibara. There he forges a new kind of political entity, the Mandan Kurufaba, or the Mali Empire. He establishes a constitutional framework known as the Kuraukan Fauga, a charter of rights and responsibilities that divided society into clans with specific occupations, outlawed the mistreatment of prisoners of war, and established environmental protections. It was a revolutionary act of statecraft, creating a unified, multi-ethnic empire built not just on conquest, but on law and mutual obligation. He founded his capital at Naini, which under his rule became a legendary city of wealth and learning, a precursor to the even more famous Timbuktu. The epic of Sundiata endures because it is the ultimate story of resilience and destiny. It tells us that a leader is not born great, but forged in adversity, that true power comes from unity and justice, and that even the darkest magic cannot stand against the collective will of a people united behind a righteous cause. Emerging from the sun-drenched savannas of Mali, our journey now carries us north to a landscape of an entirely different character, a land of deep, silent forests, misty bogs, and a coastline carved by the Baltic Sea. This is Estonia, and its national soul is captured not in the warm melodies of a griot song, but in the measured, resonant verses of an epic forged from the very bedrock and birch trees of the homeland, the Kalevipoeg. Compiled and artistically woven in the 19th century by the scholar Friedrich Reinhold Kreutzwald, much like the Finnish Kalevala, this epic draws from a deep well of Estonian folk songs and runic verses, creating a narrative that is both a mythic adventure and a poignant map of the nation's identity. At its heart strides a hero of literal and figurative gigantic proportions, Kalevipoeg, the son of the ancient King Kalev. He is not a subtle or cunning trickster. His defining trait is an earth-shaking, raw physical strength, a power so immense that he can wade across the sea from Estonia to Finland, his legs carving out new bays and inlets as he walks. He is a being of the land itself, his adventures etching themselves directly into the Estonian topography, explaining the origins of lakes, hills, and ancient stone formations through his colossal deeds. His story is a tapestry of fantastical journeys and brutal conflicts, a chronicle of a hero constantly tested by the malevolent forces that lurk in the wilderness. He does not battle foreign armies for a throne, but something more primal, the demons, sorcerers, and monstrous creatures that threaten the peace and order of his home. He fights the Sarvik, a fearsome horned demon, and vanquishes sorcerers who wield dark magic. In one of his most defining adventures, his own brothers are kidnapped and taken to the underworld. Without hesitation, Kalevipoeg pursues them, descending into the Estonian version of the afterlife, a realm known as Porgu, the Hell. His journey there is a perilous one, confronting the souls of the dead and the sinister beings that rule over them. His ultimate adversary in this shadowy realm is none other than the devil himself, the Vanapagan, or Old Heathen. Their confrontations are titanic struggles, but they are also deeply personal and strangely intimate, often revolving around a farm or a boundary line, reflecting the very real, everyday concerns of the Estonian peasantry whose stories fed the epic. The Vanapagan is not just a biblical Satan, He is a folkloric trickster, a grumpy, powerful neighbor who is constantly scheming to steal Kælvepog's land, his crops, or his powerful possessions. In one famous tale, the devil attempts to build a farmhouse on Kælvepog's land while the hero is away. Kælvepog returns and with a mighty heave lifts the entire structure and hurls it into a lake where it is said to remain to this day. These episodes blend the cosmic and the comical, grounding the myth in a world where evil is something you might literally find trying to plow your field in the morning. The epic is profoundly rooted in the Estonian landscape, making it a geographic as well as a literary treasure. Every significant rock, lake, and hill seems to have a story connected to Kælvepog's life. Lake Uljast, for instance, is said to have been formed from the hoofprint of his horse. The deep crater at Tuhala is known as the Witch's Well, and its legendary flooding is attributed to the hero's staff striking the ground. He throws boulders that become the runic stones dotting the countryside. He drags his sword through the earth, carving out riverbeds. This intricate connection transforms the entire country into an open-air museum of the myth, where the natural world is not just a setting, but an active character and a record of the hero's passage. This gives the Kælvepog a powerful, tangible presence that few other epics can claim. To walk through an Estonian forest is to walk through the pages of the story itself. Yet, as with so many great heroes, his greatest strength also contains the seed of his tragic fate. His power, while protective, is also uncontrollable and often leads to unintended catastrophe. In a moment of rage or carelessness, he commits a terrible, unforgivable act. He unknowingly kills his own beloved brother. In some versions, it is a tragic accident during a fight, a blow struck with too much force. In others, it is a case of mistaken identity in the heat of a chaotic battle. However it happens, the result is the same, a profound, soul-crushing guilt that haunts him for the rest of his days. This personal failing establishes the central theme of the epic, that even the mightiest are subject to fate and the consequences of their own nature. His immense power, which should be a pure blessing, is revealed to be a double-edged sword, capable of both great good and irreversible harm. This sin sets him on a path of atonement that ultimately leads to his downfall. The gods, or the cosmic forces of judgment, decree that he must be punished for his fratricide. The sentence is as poetic as it is severe. In the epic's final, haunting moments, Kælvepog is condemned to stand guard for all eternity at the gates of Porgu, the very underworld he once bravely invaded. But the mechanism of his binding is the ultimate irony. He is not chained by the devil he so often defeated. Instead, he is bound in place by his own sword, the symbol of his strength and his heroic identity, driven into the ground and fastened around his legs. He becomes a permanent prisoner of his own power, a silent, eternal sentinel at the threshold of darkness. This ending is not a triumphant apotheosis, but a somber, deeply resonant conclusion. He does not ascend to the heavens as a god or fade into a peaceful retirement. He remains bound to the land forever, his fate intertwined with the nation he protected. The promise, however, is that one day, when his sword finally breaks free from the rock, he will return to liberate his people in their time of greatest need. This mirrors the king in the mountain archetype found across Europe, but with a uniquely Estonian gravity. The Kælvepog is thus more than a simple giant. He is a national archetype, a symbol of the resilient Estonian spirit, capable of immense strength and endurance, but also burdened by a history of tragedy and foreign domination. His eternal vigil at the gates of hell is a powerful metaphor for a nation perpetually standing watch on the border between the Western world and vast, imposing powers, waiting for the moment to reclaim its full sovereignty and strength. From the mists and melancholy of the Estonian forests, we now travel westward to the heart of medieval Europe, where history and myth were being forged into a different kind of epic, one not of a solitary giant, but of glittering courts, shattered oaths, and a revenge so absolute it consumes everything in its path. This is the Nibelungenlied, the Song of the Nibelungs, a monumental German poem composed around the year 1200. It stands as a fascinating counterpart to the Norse Volsunga saga, drawing from the same deep well of migration period history and Germanic legend, but reframing it through the lens of chivalric romance and the complex politics of the High Middle Ages. It is a story that begins with radiant heroism and a celebrated marriage, but it spirals downward into a vortex of betrayal, greed, and vengeance, culminating in one of the most devastating finales in all of literature. Our hero, as in the Volsunga saga, is the dragon slayer Siegfried, Prince of the Netherlands. He is the archetype of the perfect knight, possessing immense strength courtesy of the cloak of invisibility he won from the dwarf Alberich, and near invulnerability from bathing in the blood of a dragon he slew, a baptism of power marred only by a single linden leaf that stuck to his shoulder, leaving one tiny, fatal spot vulnerable. Arriving at the splendid court of the Burgundians in Worms, he is a figure of almost supernatural prowess, come to woo the legendary beauty Kriemhild, sister to King Gunther. But the path to her hand is not simple. To prove his worth and secure his bride, Siegfried agrees to help Gunther win his own formidable queen, the Icelandic warrior Princess Brunhild. This queen is no passive prize. She demands that any suitor must defeat her in 3 superhuman games of strength, throwing a javelin, hurling a stone, and then making a mighty leap. If the suitor fails, he loses his head. Gunther, a capable king but no match for Brunhild's otherworldly power, relies entirely on Siegfried. Using his cloak of invisibility, Siegfried becomes Gunther's unseen double, performing the feats of strength while the king merely pantomimes the actions. Through this glorious deception, Brunhild is defeated and agrees to marry Gunther, believing him to be the mightiest man alive. This foundational act of trickery, though successful, plants the poisonous seed that will grow to destroy them all. It creates a secret that humiliates Brunhild and gives a powerful man a dangerous hold over a king. The double wedding is celebrated with immense pomp, but the deception immediately creates tension. On their wedding night, Brunhild, still believing in her own superiority, refuses to consummate the marriage with Gunther, tying him up and hanging him on a nail on the wall. Once again, the humiliated king is forced to call upon Siegfried. Donning his cloak of invisibility once more, Siegfried enters the royal bedchamber. In a brutal struggle, he subdues Brunhild, taking her girdle and ring as proof of his victory, and then allows Gunther to take his place. This violation is the ultimate insult to the proud queen, and the stolen tokens become physical embodiments of the lie at the heart of the Burgundian court. For a time, however, peace reigns. Siegfried and Kriemhild are deeply in love, and they rule their own lands happily for 10 years. The crisis erupts when Brunhild, still nagged by the question of why Kriemhild, a vassal's wife, holds equal status to her, a queen, provokes a confrontation at the cathedral doors. She attempts to block Kriemhild from entering before her, asserting her royal precedence. In a moment of furious pride, Kriemhild shatters the peace forever. She publicly denounces Brunhild, declaring that her own husband, Siegfried, is not Gunther's vassal but his superior, the very man who subdued Brunhild on her own wedding night. To prove it, she produces the girdle and ring. For Brunhild, this is an unbearable, shattering revelation. The public humiliation transforms her from a proud queen into a weeping, vengeful woman. Her honor, the very currency of this world, has been utterly destroyed, and she demands restitution. This is where one of the most sinister figures in the epic steps from the shadows, Hagen of Tronje, Gunther's most loyal and ruthless vassal. Where Siegfried represents the ideal of chivalric heroism, Hagen is the embodiment of cold, pragmatic, and brutal realpolitik. He sees the public shaming of his king and queen as an unforgivable crime that can only be cleansed with blood. He calmly and methodically plots Siegfried's murder, manipulating the grieving and enraged Brunhild and the conflicted Gunther into compliance. To carry out his plan, he first wins the trust of the unsuspecting Kriemhild. Pretending to be a concerned protector, he persuades her to reveal the secret of Siegfried's vulnerability, telling her that he needs to know how to best guard the hero in battle. Trusting and naive, Kriemhild succumbs to his false concern. She takes a piece of silk and secretly sews a small cross on Siegfried's tunic, directly over the spot on his shoulder where the linden leaf had fallen. The image is heartbreakingly intimate. A wife's loving stitch becomes the marker for her husband's assassin. The stage is set for a royal hunt, in a tranquil forest clearing by a spring. As Siegfried bends down to drink, Hagen drives his spear through the cross on his back. The hero's invulnerability fails him, and he falls, dying in a final, poetic burst of fury and sorrow. His murder is not a fair fight. It is a cowardly ambush, a stark contrast to the open, honorable combats he himself always sought. Siegfried's body is carried back to Worms and laid at Kriemhild's doorway. Her grief is a raw, all-consuming force. When she discovers the cross she sewed, she knows immediately that Hagen is the killer and that her own trust was the weapon. Her love for Siegfried, once the source of her happiness, now curdles into a cold, patient, and equally absolute desire for vengeance. The magnificent treasure of the Nibelungs, which Siegfried had won and which rightfully belongs to her as his widow, becomes the next instrument of the curse. Fearing the power it would give her to raise armies, Hagen persuades King Gunther to seize it. He then sinks the entire colossal hoard, chests of gold and gems beyond imagining, into the Rhine River at a secret location, believing he has removed the means for Kriemhild's revenge. But he has only deepened her resolve and compounded the original sin with an act of profound theft. For years, Kriemhild bides her time, a widow trapped in a court of her husband's murderers, her grief a cold stone in her chest. Her chance for vengeance comes in the form of a new marriage proposal from Etzel, the mighty king of the Huns, a character based on the historical Attila. Seeing a path to immense power, she accepts, leaving Burgundy and traveling to Etzel's court. There, after many years, she has a son with Etzel and carefully cultivates her influence, all while never forgetting her true purpose. She then issues a fateful invitation to her brothers and their court, including Hagen, to visit her in the land of the Huns. Despite Hagen's fierce and accurate suspicions that it is a trap, pride and the conventions of hospitality compel the Burgundians to accept. The final third of the poem, often called the Kriemhild's Revenge, is a masterfully paced descent into a bloodbath. The Burgundians arrive at Etzel's great hall and tensions immediately simmer. Kriemhild's demands for the return of the Nibelung treasure are met with arrogant refusal by Hagen, who flaunts his knowledge of its secret resting place in the Rhine. This is the final spark. Kriemhild unleashes the fury she has nurtured for 13 years. What begins as a diplomatic visit erupts into an all-out battle inside the hall itself. The imagery shifts from the chivalric splendor of Worms to a claustrophobic, apocalyptic slaughterhouse. The Burgundian knights, led by the indomitable Hagen, fight with desperate, cornered valor, turning the hall into a fortress. They fend off wave after wave of Hunnish warriors, the floor growing slick with blood and the air thick with the screams of the dying. Kriemhild, no longer a grieving woman but a goddess of vengeance, orders the hall to be set on fire, forcing her own kin and their followers into a blazing inferno. The survivors, choking on smoke and heat, suffer agonizing thirst. In a moment of stark, brutal symbolism, Hagen taunts them by refusing to let them drink from the Danube River until his own lord, Gunther, gives the order, a last defiant act of loyalty even in the face of certain doom. The climax is as personal as it is horrific. After the fire has done its work and the few remaining Burgundians are captured, Kriemhild confronts her brother Gunther and Hagen. She has Gunther beheaded and brings his head to Hagen, demanding to know the location of the treasure. His final, defiant words are that now only God and he know the secret and he will never tell her. In a final, unrestrained explosion of rage, Kriemhild seizes Siegfried's own sword, which Hagen had taken from his corpse, and strikes off his head. Her revenge is complete. But in this world, such an act cannot go unpunished. The Gothic knight Hildebrand, horrified by the sight of a woman killing a bound hero, immediately steps forward and cuts Kriemhild down. The epic ends with utter desolation. The royal houses of Burgundy and the Huns are left in ruins, their halls filled with the dead, and the cursed treasure of the Nibelungs lies forever lost beneath the waters of the Rhine, a glittering, unattainable reminder of the greed and vengeance that destroyed an entire world. From the claustrophobic, blood-drenched hall of the Nibelungenlied, we step back several centuries and sail across the North Sea to the cold, wind-lashed shores of Scandinavia, to a world of warrior kings, towering mead halls, and the monsters that lurk just beyond the firelight. This is the world of Beowulf, the great epic of Old English literature, a poem preserved in a single, fire-damaged manuscript that somehow survived the centuries. It is a story that feels both ancient and immediate, a tale of a hero who embodies the absolute pinnacle of the Anglo-Saxon warrior code, a man whose life is defined by 3 colossal confrontations against forces that represent nothing less than the encroaching darkness of chaos and existential evil. Our introduction to this world is the court of King Hrothgar of the Danes, a wise and generous ruler who has built a magnificent mead hall called Heorot, a place of light, music, and fellowship for his warriors. But this sanctuary of human civilization attracts a being who cannot bear its sounds of joy. From the fens and moors, from his exile in the darkness, comes Grendel, a monstrous, vaguely humanoid creature descended from the biblical Cain, the original murderer. Grendel is not just a physical threat, he is the embodiment of envy, loneliness, and hatred for the community he can never join. For 12 long years he stalks Heorot, bursting in at night to snatch and devour Hrothgar's thanes, his warriors. The hall, once a symbol of unity and power, becomes a place of terror and mourning, its golden gables standing as a silent testament to a kingdom paralyzed by fear. It is into this crisis that our hero, Beowulf, a warrior of the Geats from what is now southern Sweden, arrives with a small band of his finest men. He has heard of Hrothgar's plight, and driven by the heroic imperative to win fame and aid those in need, he has sailed across the sea to offer his help. His first speech to Hrothgar is a masterpiece of heroic boast, not as empty arrogance, but as a formal, necessary declaration of his capabilities and intent. He announces that he will fight Grendel without sword or shield, matching the monster's own raw, untamed strength in a contest of pure power. The confrontation in Heorot that night is one of the most visceral and iconic in all of literature. Beowulf and his men bed down in the hall, waiting. When Grendel bursts through the bolted doors, his eyes gleaming with a hellish light, he immediately seizes a sleeping Geatish warrior, devouring him with gruesome efficiency. He then reaches for Beowulf, but this time the monster has met his match. Beowulf, feigning sleep, springs up and seizes Grendel's arm in a grip with the strength of 30 men. What follows is not a graceful sword fight, but a brutal, desperate wrestling match that shakes the very foundations of Heorot. Benches are shattered, tapestries torn from the walls. Grendel, for the first time, knows sheer, mind-numbing terror. He tries to flee, but Beowulf's hold is unbreakable. The shrieks of the monster are so terrible they chill the blood of the Danes listening outside. With a final, titanic effort, Beowulf wrenches Grendel's arm completely from its socket, ripping the muscles and tendons from the bone. Mortally wounded, the monster flees back to his fen, leaving a trail of blood, and Beowulf mounts the torn-off arm, shoulder, claw, and all, high up under the roof of Heorot as a grisly trophy of his victory. This victory is not just over a single monster. It is the triumph of human order and courageous will over the mindless, predatory chaos that threatens to extinguish it. The celebration that follows is immense, with rich gifts, poetry, and mead flowing freely in a hall once again safe for human laughter. But the darkness has not been fully vanquished. The next night, a new horror visits Heorot, Grendel's mother. She is not merely avenging her son, she is an even more ancient and primal force, a creature of the deep, cold waters. In a swift and bloody raid, she kills one of Hrothgar's most beloved advisors and retrieves her son's severed arm. The court is plunged back into despair. Beowulf, his duty not yet complete, vows to hunt her down. This leads to the epic's second great battle, a descent into a world even more alien and terrifying than the shadowy fens. Following the monster's trail to an eerie, blood-stained lake inhabited by sea serpents and other nameless creatures, Beowulf dons his armor and takes up a legendary sword named Hrunting, loaned to him by a warrior named Unferth. He dives into the murky, frigid water, sinking for what seems like an entire day before he is seized by Grendel's mother and dragged into a cavern, a dry, fire-lit hall deep beneath the lake, a perverse inversion of the human hall above. The fight here is different. The water negates Beowulf's strength advantage, and the magical sword Hrunting, which had never failed in battle before, is useless against the monster's hide, its edge failing to bite. Disarmed and overpowered, Beowulf is thrown to the ground, and the she-troll sits upon him, drawing a dagger to finish him. It seems like the end, but the hero's salvation comes from a source of pure, ancient providence. Lying on the cavern floor is a massive, magnificent sword, a weapon from the Age of Giants, so huge and heavy that no ordinary man could wield it. In a final, desperate surge of strength, Beowulf seizes this giant wrought blade and brings it down upon Grendel's mother's neck, slicing through bone and sinew and ending her life. The light that then emanates from the blade illuminates the cavern, and Beowulf sees the corpse of Grendel. In a final act of vengeance, he beheads the dead monster, and the hot, poisonous blood of the two creatures melts the giant sword's blade, leaving only the hilt, which Beowulf carries back to the surface as his ultimate prize. This victory is more profound than the first. It represents the hero's journey into the deepest source of evil, the very womb of the threat, and his ability to overcome it not just with strength, but with resilience and a touch of divine favor, emerging from the water not just as a slayer of monsters, but as a mythic figure reborn. The poem then performs a breathtaking leap in time. We leave the young, triumphant Beowulf and rejoin him 50 years later. He is now an old man, having ruled his people as a wise and generous king for half a century. The warrior who fought with his bare hands now faces a final, different kind of enemy. A runaway slave seeking refuge stumbles into a barrow and awakens a sleeping dragon by stealing a single, jeweled cup from its vast treasure hoard. Enraged, the dragon begins to vomit fire upon the Geatish countryside, burning homes and terrorizing the people. This is the third and final act of Beowulf's life. The ideals of the heroic code demand that the king, even in his old age, must be the protector of his people. He will face this threat himself. He has a special iron shield forged to withstand the dragon's breath, and with 11 loyal thanes plus the coward who stole the cup as their guide, he marches to the dragon's barrow. Yet, sensing the immense danger, he feels the weight of his mortality. Before the fight, he delivers a poignant speech, a king's reflection on his long life and his duty, haunted by the foreboding that this will be his final battle. True to his premonition, the fight goes badly. His companions, except for one young warrior named Wiglaf, are seized with fear and flee into the woods. Beowulf's shield offers some protection, but his own sword, Nigling, shatters on the dragon's impenetrable skull. The dragon seizes the old king's neck in its poisonous fangs. It is Wiglaf, embodying the very loyalty Beowulf showed to Hrothgar decades before, who rushes to his lord's aid, remembering the bonds of kinship and the gifts of armor and treasure he received from his king. Wiglaf shouts a rebuke to the cowards and charges forward. He strikes the dragon in its underside, a less armored spot, and this distraction allows the mortally wounded Beowulf to draw a dagger and deliver the killing blow. The dragon is slain, but the cost is absolute. The poison from the bite courses through Beowulf's veins, With his dying breaths, he asks Wiglaf to bring him the dragon's treasure so he may look upon the hoard he has won for his people. He then gives Wiglaf instructions for his burial, a grand barrow on a headland, to be called Beowulf's Barrow, a sea mark for sailors and an eternal reminder of his legacy. His final words are not of personal glory, but of concern for his people, whom he knows will now be vulnerable to attack from their enemies without his protection. The poem ends not with a triumphant celebration, but with the solemn funeral of the great king, his people lamenting not only his death, but the grim and uncertain future that now awaits them. Beowulf's story is the ultimate expression of the Anglo-Saxon heroic ideal, a life of courage, loyalty, and generosity, dedicated to protecting one's community from the existential threats of the dark, and a sober acceptance that even the greatest of heroes is in the end mortal. After witnessing the rise and fall of mortal heroes, we must now turn our gaze to a far grander and more primal conflict, a story that charts the very birth of the cosmos and the violent dynastic struggles that forged the gods themselves. This is Hesiod's Theogony, a sweeping cosmological saga from the 8th century before the Common Era that serves as the bedrock for the entire edifice of Greek myth. Unlike the focused narratives of the Iliad or the Odyssey, which follow the fates of individual men, the Theogony is a colossal family history of the divine, a genealogical epic that explains how the universe evolved from a formless void into a structured order ruled by Zeus. It all begins with the very first entity, a concept both simple and profoundly unsettling: chaos. This was not mere disorder as we think of it today, but a yawning gap, a primordial emptiness that existed before anything else. From this void, the other fundamental forces emerged: Gaia, the solid, life-giving earth; Tartarus, the deep, gloomy abyss beneath the earth; and Eros, the powerful force of attraction and procreation, the catalyst that would set the entire chain of creation in motion. Without a partner, Gaia gave birth to Uranus, the starry sky, and then, through her union with him, became the mother of the first truly powerful pantheon, the 12 Titans, massive and potent beings who represented the raw, untamed forces of nature, including the wise Oceanus and the mighty Cronus. She also bore the 3 one-eyed Cyclopes, master smiths of thunder and lightning, and the 3 Hecatoncheires, the 100-handed, 50-headed monsters of unimaginable strength. The first great power struggle in the cosmos was not between gods and mortals, but between father and son. Uranus the sky proved to be a jealous and tyrannical father. He hated his monstrous children, the Cyclopes and Hecatoncheires, and as each was born, he forced them back into the dark womb of their mother, Gaia, causing her immense pain and trapping them within the earth. Grieving and enraged, Gaia fashioned a great, jagged-toothed sickle of adamant and appealed to her Titan children for help. Only the youngest and most cunning, Cronus, had the courage to answer her call. He lay in ambush, and when Uranus descended to lie with Gaia, Cronus sprang forth, wielding the sickle to castrate his own father, severing his connection to the creative power of the earth and seizing control of the cosmos for himself. The blood that fell upon the earth from this violent act gave birth to the Erinyes, the Furies who would avenge crimes against kin, the giants, and the Melii, the nymphs of the ash trees. This act established a chilling pattern of succession, the son overthrowing the father through betrayal and violence, a pattern Cronus himself would soon come to dread. Cronus ruled during the fabled Golden Age, a time of peace and abundance for the earth, but his reign was built on a foundation of paranoia. He had been warned by Gaia and Uranus that he, too, was destined to be overthrown by one of his own children. Determined to avoid this fate, he took the most horrific precaution imaginable. As each of his children by the Titan Re was born Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, he snatched them from their mother's arms and swallowed them whole, imprisoning them within his own belly. Re, devastated and desperate, turned to her parents for counsel when she was pregnant with her 6th child. On their advice, she went to Crete to give birth in secret. This child was Zeus. To deceive Cronus, she presented him not with a baby, but with a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes, which the Titan, in his haste and greed, swallowed without a second thought, believing his line of succession to be forever secure. The infant Zeus was hidden away in a cave on Mount Ida, where he was nursed by the goat Amalthea and protected by the Curetes, divine attendants who clashed their spears against their shields to mask the infant's cries from his vengeful father. This deception was the turning point, the moment the old order's downfall was assured by its own brutal logic. When Zeus came of age, his first act was to free his siblings, forcing Cronus to disgorge the children he had consumed one by one in reverse order. United, these gods, the first Olympians, recognized the need for allies in the coming war against the old god of the Titans. Zeus journeyed to the depths of Tartarus and freed the monstrous Cyclopes and Hecatoncheires, the very beings his grandfather had so feared. In gratitude, the Cyclopes forged for him his iconic weapon, the thunderbolt, a symbol of his sovereign power. To Poseidon they gave the trident, and to Hades a helmet of invisibility. The stage was set for the ultimate cosmic conflict, the Titanomachy, a 10-year war that pitted the old gods against the new. This was not a battle on a human scale, it was a cataclysm that shook the very foundations of the universe. The Titans, led by the powerful Atlas, made their stronghold on Mount Othrys, while Zeus and his siblings ruled from Mount Olympus. The Hecatoncheires, with their 100 hands, became the Olympians' ultimate weapon, hurling 300 boulders at a time against the Titans, creating such a tremendous barrage that the very earth groaned and the sky roared. The conflict was so immense that it threatened to unravel creation itself, until Zeus, wielding his thunderbolt with decisive force, unleashed a final, searing blast that routed the Titan army and cast the survivors, including Cronus, down into the deepest pit of Tartarus, where they were imprisoned for all eternity under the watchful eyes of their former prisoners, the Hecatoncheires. But victory over the Titans did not usher in an era of unchallenged peace. The cosmos, it seemed, had one more ancient and terrifying power to unleash. Gaia, angered by the imprisonment of her Titan children, coupled with Tartarus and produced her most fearsome offspring yet, Typhon, a monster so vast his head brushed the stars, with 100 serpent heads sprouting from his shoulders, each screaming with the voices of bulls, lions, and dogs, and eyes that shot forth searing flames. He was the embodiment of chaotic, raw, untamed nature, a final, desperate challenge to the new order of Zeus. As Typhon advanced, hurling entire mountains and breathing torrents of fire, the other Olympian gods fled in terror, transforming into animals to escape. Only Zeus stood firm. The ensuing duel was the single greatest test of his power. He assailed the monster with a relentless barrage of thunderbolts, scorching its many heads, but Typhon wrested the very sickle used to castrate Uranus from Zeus's grasp and used it to cut the sinews from the god's hands and feet, immobilizing him. It was only through the cunning of Hermes and the strength of Pan that the sinews were recovered and restored, allowing Zeus to resume the fight with renewed fury. Finally, with a thunderbolt of such cataclysmic power, it boiled the seas and shattered the land. Zeus struck Typhon down, burying him beneath Mount Etna in Sicily, where his fiery breath is said to cause the volcano's eruptions to this day. With the defeat of Typhon, the rule of the Olympians was finally, irrevocably secure. The theogony concludes not with an ending, but with a beginning, the establishment of a new, stable cosmic order under the wise and just sovereignty of Zeus, who apportioned the domains of the world, giving the sea to Poseidon, the underworld to Hades, and retaining the sky and ultimate authority for himself. This foundational epic provides the essential backdrop for every Greek myth that follows, a reminder that the world of gods and men was forged in a crucible of primordial struggle, betrayal, and the relentless, often brutal, passage of power from one generation to the next. But we have now witnessed the birth of the cosmos and the rise of the Olympian gods, but what of the world of mortals? How did the great cities and empires of humanity come to be? To answer that, we must return to the smoldering ashes of a city we thought we had left behind, Troy. As the Greeks poured from the wooden horse and set the proud city ablaze, the story was not over for everyone. While the Iliad chronicled the rage of Achilles and the Odyssey the cunning of Odysseus, a third epic emerges from the flames, one that would shift the entire focus of Western literature from the glory of Greece to the destiny of Rome. This is Virgil's Aeneid, a national epic commissioned by the first Roman emperor, Augustus, with a very specific and profound purpose: to give the sprawling, powerful Roman Empire a mythic origin story worthy of its grandeur, directly linking it to the heroic and tragic world of Homer. The poem consciously mirrors its Greek predecessors, but with a crucial difference. Where Achilles fought for personal glory and Odysseus for a return home, our new hero, Aeneas, a minor Trojan prince from the Iliad, is driven by something far larger than himself, fate. His personal desires, his comfort, even his own happiness, are all secondary to a divine mandate to sail west and found a new city in Italy, a city that will one day become the master of the world. We first meet Aeneas in the thick of Troy's final horrific night. As the city burns, he fights a desperate, futile rearguard action, witnessing the murder of King Priam at his own household altar. It is in this chaos that the gods themselves intervene. His mother, the goddess Venus, appears to him, revealing the horrifying truth: Troy's doom is fated. His duty is no longer to a lost cause, but to the future. He is to gather the sacred household gods of Troy, the Penates, his elderly father Anchises, and his young son Ascanius, and lead a band of survivors to a new land across the sea. The image of Aeneas carrying his father on his shoulders while holding his son's hand and clutching the household gods becomes the quintessential symbol of pietas, a Roman concept far richer than simple piety. It is a profound, unwavering sense of duty to the gods, to one's family, and to the destiny of one's people. This is the core of his character. He is not a hero of passionate wrath or clever tricks, but of solemn, often painful responsibility. His escape is harrowing, his wife Creusa lost in the confusion, her ghost appearing to him to confirm his destiny lies not in the past, but in a distant Western kingdom. His journey across the Mediterranean mirrors that of Odysseus, but it is a voyage shadowed by a different kind of sorrow. A storm conjured by the vengeful goddess Juno, who holds an eternal grudge against the Trojans, washes his fleet ashore at Carthage in North Africa. Here he encounters the city's magnificent and formidable founder, Queen Dido. Still grieving the murder of her husband, Dido has built a thriving refuge, a queen in complete control of her destiny. As Aeneas recounts the fall of Troy in the city's grand temple, a structure whose friezes already depict the Trojan War, Dido's heart is moved and then captivated. The goddess Venus, hoping to secure her son's safety, conspires with Cupid to make Dido fall deeply in love with Aeneas. What follows is one of the most powerful and tragic love stories in all of antiquity. For a time, Aeneas is seduced by the possibility of a different life. He helps fortify Carthage, he shares Dido's bed, and it seems he has found a new home and a new kingdom with a powerful and passionate queen at his side. But the gods will not allow this detour. Jupiter, the king of the gods, sends the messenger god Mercury to deliver a stark, uncompromising reminder to Aeneas. You are betraying your own destiny for a woman's sake. Your fate lies in Italy, not here. The moment is shattering. Aeneas is torn between his profound love for Dido and his sacred cosmic duty. Pietas wins. In secret, he orders his fleet to prepare for departure. When Dido discovers his plans, her reaction is a masterclass of tragic fury. Her love, once so generous, curdles into a bitter, vengeful hate. She confronts him, her words a torrent of pain and accusation. You, even you, will you betray me too? She calls him a traitor, a liar, and a man with a heart of stone. Aeneas, though visibly tormented, stands firm, his eyes fixed on the ground, his will steely. He cannot disobey the command of fate. I do not seek Italy of my own free will. He tells her, a line that encapsulates the terrible burden of his heroism. As his ships sail away, Dido, in her despair and madness, orders a great pyre to be built, supposedly to burn the relics he left behind. She climbs to the top, curses Aeneas and his entire race, prophesying an eternal enmity between their peoples, a clear poetic justification for the later Punic Wars between Rome and Carthage, and then, using his own sword, she takes her own life. Her final words are a chilling promise of undying hatred. Then, O my Tyrians, besiege with hate his progeny and all his race to come. From the deck of his ship, Aeneas sees the ominous glow of her funeral pyre lighting up the Carthaginian sky, a terrible beacon of the personal cost of his destiny. Driven onward by this grim reminder, Aeneas finally reaches the coast of Italy near Cumae. Here, he undertakes a journey as pivotal as that of Odysseus, a descent into the underworld. Guided by the Sibyl, a prophetic priestess, he passes the threshold of life and death, crossing the river Styx and encountering the shades of the unburied dead, the fields of mourning for those who died of love, and the monstrous figures of myth. His purpose is not to seek knowledge, but to meet the spirit of his father, Anchises, who died during the voyage. In a verdant, peaceful part of the underworld reserved for the blessed, Anchises reveals to Aeneas the breathtaking scope of his mission. He shows him a grand pageant of Roman souls yet to be born, a parade of future heroes stretching for centuries, the founders of the Republic, the great generals, and the politicians who would shape the Mediterranean world. Most importantly, he points to a young man who will be the Emperor Augustus, the very patron of Virgil's poem, the man who would usher in a golden age of peace and order. This is the Aeneid's ultimate political purpose laid bare. It is not just the story of one man's journey, it is the preordained history of Rome itself, a city founded with divine favor and destined for eternal rule. Anchises leaves his son with the famous defining mission statement for Rome. Remember, Roman, it is for you to rule the nations with your power. These will be your arts to impose the ways of peace, to spare the vanquished and to tame the proud. This is the Roman ideal of power tempered by justice and mercy, the ideological cornerstone that Virgil is crafting for the new Augustan regime. Emerging from the underworld with his purpose clarified and his resolve hardened, Aeneas sails north to the region of Latium. Here, the local king, Latinus, has received prophecies that his daughter, Lavinia, is destined to marry a foreigner, and he welcomes Aeneas. But this peaceful integration is shattered by the fury of Juno, who once again stirs up conflict. She inflames the jealousy of Turnus, a local Rutulian prince who was also a suitor for Lavinia's hand. What follows is the epic's final, bloody act, a war for the right to found the new civilization. The second half of the Aeneid reads like the Iliad, filled with brutal, personalized battles, divine interventions, and the tragic deaths of young warriors on both sides. Aeneas, now a seasoned and determined leader, forges an alliance with the Arcadian king Evander and receives a magnificent shield forged by the god Vulcan, which depicts in prophetic detail the entire future history of Rome, from Romulus and Remus to the Battle of Actium. The climax is the long-awaited duel between Aeneas and Turnus. After a fierce fight, Aeneas defeats Turnus, pinning him to the ground. The defeated warrior begs for mercy, asking for his body to be returned to his aged father. For a moment, Aeneas hesitates, moved by the plea, but then his eyes fall upon the belt of Turnus, which the Rutulian had stripped from the body of Aeneas's young protege, Pallas. Rage, grief, and a sense of duty to avenge his fallen comrade overwhelm his mercy, crying, "Do you think you can escape me now, dressed in the spoils of my friend?" He drives his sword full into Turnus's chest. The epic ends not with celebration, but with this act of furious, necessary violence. The founding of Rome is not a clean, peaceful event. It is born from the ashes of a fallen city, a broken heart, and the blood of a rival. a sobering and powerful conclusion to a poem that seeks to explain both the glory and the heavy moral price of an empire's birth. Leaving the ordered world of Roman destiny, we plunge now into a realm governed by an entirely different logic, a cycle of death and rebirth etched into the very soil of the Nile. This is the story of the Egyptian Osiris myth, a foundational narrative that was not merely a tale told for entertainment, but the very bedrock of an entire civilization's understanding of life, death, and the divine right to rule. Imagine the world in its infancy, with the gods themselves walking the earth as kings. The wise and benevolent Osiris ruled over Egypt, bringing civilization to a land once steeped in chaos. He taught humanity the arts of agriculture, established laws, and ushered in an age of prosperity. His sister and queen, Isis, was his perfect counterpart, a goddess of staggering power and intellect, the mistress of magic and the throne. But this golden age was not to last, for it was shadowed by the envy of their brother, Set, a god of storms, violence, and the untamed desert. Where Osiris represented the life-giving, predictable order of the Nile's annual flood, Set embodied the brutal chaos of the sandstorm and the drought. This fraternal conflict was a cosmic one, a battle between the fertile black land of Kemet and the sterile red land of the desert. The catalyst for the tragedy was a grand feast. Set, having nurtured his resentment for years, arrived at a celebration in honor of Osiris with a magnificent, lavishly decorated chest, crafted precisely to the king's measurements. As was the custom, he offered this beautiful sarcophagus as a gift to whoever could fit inside it perfectly. One by one, the guests tried and failed. Finally, the unsuspecting Osiris lay down inside the ornate box. In an instant, Set and his 72 conspirators slammed the lid shut, sealed it with molten lead, and hurled the chest into the swirling currents of the Nile. The divine king was dead, his body lost, and Set seized the throne of Egypt, plunging the two lands into a period of tyranny and disorder. The Nile itself seemed to mourn, its life-giving waters reflecting the despair of a world without its rightful ruler. This is where the story elevates from a simple murder mystery to an epic of unwavering devotion. Isis, consumed by a grief that was also a weapon, cut off her hair, tore her robes, and began the most desperate search in all of mythology. She wandered the length of Egypt, asking everyone she met, human, beast, and demon, for any whisper of the chest's whereabouts. Her quest led her to the shores of the Mediterranean and then to the Phoenician city of Byblos. Here, she discovered that the chest had been washed ashore and had become encased within the trunk of a magnificent tamarisk tree, which the local king had cut down to serve as a pillar in his palace. Isis, disguising herself as an old nurse, sat by a well, weeping. Her divine sorrow was so potent that it infected the royal household, causing the queen's handmaidens to be drawn to her. Through her magic, Isis secured a position as nursemaid to the queen's infant son. By night, she would hold the baby in the fire to burn away his mortality, while she herself, in the form of a swallow, flew around the wooden pillar, chirping a lament for her lost husband. When the queen discovered this terrifying ritual and shrieked in horror, Isis revealed her true, radiant form. She demanded the pillar, and from its heart she extracted the chest containing Osiris's body. She returned with her terrible prize to the seclusion of the Nile Delta to mourn and to perform the rites that would restore him, but the cruelty of Set was boundless. Learning that Isis had recovered the body, he went out under the cover of night, found the casket, and in a fit of rage and spite, dismembered his brother's corpse into 14 pieces, scattering them far and wide across the nomes of Egypt. A lesser deity would have surrendered to despair. Isis did not. With the help of her sister Nephthys and the jackal-headed god Anubis, she embarked on a second, even more grueling quest. She traveled to every corner of the land, finding each piece of her husband, all but one. The phallus had been devoured by the oxyhinchus fish of the Nile and could not be recovered. Yet, through her unparalleled magical power, Isis reassembled the body. she and Anubis performed the first mummification, wrapping the limbs in linen bandages and chanting the spells that would preserve the form for eternity. Using her magic to fashion a replacement, the goddess then transformed herself into a kite, fanning the mummified Osiris with her wings and singing a song of such power that she conceived a child. From the body of the dead king, the seed of the future avenger was sown. Osiris was now whole, but he could not return to the land of the living. His resurrection was of a different order. He descended to rule as the eternal, unchanging king of the underworld, the Lord of the Dead, a promise of life beyond the grave for every Egyptian who followed the proper funerary rites. The final act of this cosmic drama belonged to the son, Horus. Born in the secret marshes of the Delta, hidden from the murderous gaze of his uncle Set, Horus was raised by his mother, Isis, who taught him the arts of war and the singular purpose of his life, to avenge his father and reclaim the throne of Egypt. The conflict that followed was not a single battle, but a protracted legal and physical struggle that was tried before a tribunal of the gods, the Aeneid. Set the usurper argued that the throne was rightfully his, and he mocked Horus as an illegitimate and weak heir. The ensuing divine courtroom was a spectacle of deception and magical combat. In one famous episode, Set transformed himself into a hippopotamus and capsized the boat of Horus. In another, he sexually assaulted the young god in an attempt to humiliate and dominate him. Throughout the ordeal, Isis used her cunning to aid her son, at one point tricking Set into condemning himself out of his own mouth before the gods. The most pivotal moment, however, was a brutal physical clash. The two gods engaged in a ferocious battle, and in the fighting, Set managed to tear out one of Horus's eyes while Horus castrated Set. This mutilation was deeply symbolic. Set's act rendered the world imperfect, while Horus's act stripped the usurper of his power to create a lineage. The eye of Horus, however, was magically restored by the god Thoth, an act of healing that made the Wedjat eye, the eye of Horus, one of the most potent symbols of protection, wholeness, and restoration in all of Egyptian culture. It represented the moon itself, which wanes and is restored each month, a perfect emblem of cyclical renewal. Ultimately, the tribunal of the gods, weary of the endless conflict and persuaded by the righteousness of Isis's cause, declared Horus the rightful heir to his father's throne. He became the living Horus, the divine prototype for every human pharaoh who would ever rule Egypt. The king was the living embodiment of Horus, while his deceased predecessor became Osiris, Lord of the Dead. This seamless cycle of succession from the living Horus king to the dead Osiris king and back to a new Horus king was the theological engine of the Egyptian state for 3,000 years. The vanquished Set was not utterly destroyed. He was assigned a necessary, if dangerous, role as the defender of the solar bark, fighting off the serpent Apophis each night as the sun god Ra journeyed through the underworld. Even chaos had its place in the balanced cosmos. The myth's resonance is visible in every facet of Egyptian life. The Ankh, the symbol of life, was often shown being offered by gods to the nostrils of a king, granting him the breath of eternal existence, just as Isis revived Osiris. The elaborate process of mummification was a direct imitation of Anubis's work on the body of Osiris, a ritual designed to ensure the same triumphant resurrection for every justified soul. In tomb paintings and on temple walls, from the majestic columns of Karnak to the deepest royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings, the story of Osiris, Isis, and Horus was ceaselessly reiterated, a divine drama that assured the people that death was not an end but a passage, and that order, no matter how violently assailed, would always ultimately be restored. Soaring now to the roof of the world, to the breathtaking, windswept peaks of the Tian Shan Mountains, we discover an epic not carved in stone or written on parchment, but carried for 1,000 years on the breath and in the hearts of an entire people. This is the epic of Manas, the soul of the Kyrgyz nation, a story of such staggering scale that it dwarfs nearly every other epic we have encountered. It is 20 times longer than the Odyssey, and in some versions contains over 500,000 lines of verse. For the Kyrgyz, a traditionally nomadic people whose history was mobile, this epic was their moving library, their national archive, and their sacred scripture all in one, preserved and performed by master reciters known as manaski. These storytellers were not mere entertainers. They were considered to be in a state of divine inspiration, often receiving the epic in dreams. Their recitations are powerful, almost shamanic performance where they would channel the hero's spirit, their voices rising and falling for hours without break, recounting generations of heroism that defined what it meant to be Kyrgyz. At the heart of this colossal narrative is the great Khan, Manas, born in the Altai Mountains during a time of crisis when the scattered Kyrgyz tribes were divided and persecuted by powerful enemies from the west, notably the Khitans and the Kalmyks. From his very infancy, Manas is marked for greatness. It is said he spoke from the womb and walked at birth, his cradle a lion's skin, his playthings swords and arrows. He is the archetypal unifier, a figure destined not just for personal glory, but to weld the 40 disparate Kyrgyz tribes into a single, powerful nation, or El. His quest is the embodiment of the nomadic ideal, to secure grazing lands, protect the people, and forge a common identity from the chaos of the steppe. His strength is legendary, but it is his profound sense of justice and his magnetic charisma that draws the great warriors of the age to his side, forming his legendary band of 40 companions, the Kirk Koro. These are not faceless soldiers. Each has a distinct personality and a legendary specialty. There is the wise and loyal Bakai, Manas's chief advisor and strategist, the sharp-eyed Olmambit, a convert who becomes his blood brother, and the mighty Koshoy, an elder warrior of immense strength. Their bond is a central theme, a testament to the nomadic virtue of loyalty and collective action in a harsh and beautiful land. The world of Manas is one where the spiritual and the physical are intimately connected, and this connection is most powerfully embodied in the relationship between a warrior and his horse. The epic is, in many ways, as much about the horses as it is about the heroes. Manas's own steed, Akula, is a being of divine origin, a wind-footed white stallion with a coat the color of milk descended from heavenly herds. He is not a passive vehicle but a sentient, loyal partner who understands human speech, advises his master in dreams, and saves his life on countless occasions. This deep, almost mystical bond between man and horse reflects the central role the horse played in Kyrgyz nomadic life. It was a source of transportation, sustenance, and military power. The most magical and thrilling sequences often involve the hero's quests to capture these legendary steeds from hidden valleys or from herders who are themselves powerful shamans, underscoring the idea that a true hero is only as great as the companion who carries him. The narrative of the epic spans 3 generations, creating a sense of a never-ending struggle for the soul of the Kyrgyz people. After a life of constant warfare and unification, Manas is eventually betrayed and poisoned by a rival. But his story does not end with his death. It flows directly into the saga of his son, Semete. Born after his father's murder and raised in exile in the land of his grandfather, the Bukhara Khan, Semete is unaware of his glorious heritage. He grows up with a miraculous strength, yet feels a profound sense of displacement. His journey is one of rediscovery and return, guided by the old, steadfast companions of his father, and riding a horse as magnificent as Akula. He eventually learns his true identity and embarks on a quest to reclaim his father's throne from the usurpers. He succeeds in avenging Manas and restoring the kingdom, but the cycle of conflict continues. The epic then follows Semete's own son, Satek, who must in turn confront new enemies and internal strife, proving that the work of unity and freedom is a perpetual task, passed like a sacred torch from one generation to the next. This multi-generational structure makes the epic a truly national biography, a story without a final conclusion because the identity of the people it describes is a living, ongoing project. The survival of the Epic of Manas is a cultural miracle in itself. For centuries, it existed solely as an oral tradition, a fluid and dynamic text that grew and adapted with each performance by a Manaski. There was no single, fixed version. Each master reciter possessed his own unique rendition, adding local details and personal flourishes, making the epic a collaborative, living entity. This orality meant the epic was not a relic of the past, but a vibrant part of daily life, performed at weddings, funerals, and national festivals. Its values of bravery, unity, and love for the homeland constantly reinforced. In the Soviet era, this tradition was severely suppressed as authorities saw it as a potent symbol of nationalist sentiment. Many Manaski were persecuted, and the epic was forced into a standardized written form, losing some of its organic, performative magic. Yet it endured. Today, in independent Kyrgyzstan, the Epic of Manas has experienced a powerful revival. It is a cornerstone of national education, and modern Manaski perform on television and at grand state ceremonies. The epic's opening lines are known by heart by many Kyrgyz, and the image of Manas on his white horse, Ak-Kula, is a ubiquitous national symbol, a reminder that the voice of a people, when carried on the breath of its storytellers, can never truly be silenced. And now, we bring our global journey to its final, magnificent port of call, sailing from the vast, open steppes of Central Asia to the crashing waves of the Atlantic Ocean, where a small kingdom on the very edge of the known world was about to change history forever. Our 25th and final epic is a story of salt spray and celestial intervention, of human courage stretched to its absolute limit and immortalized in verse. This is the Lusíads by Luís de Camões, the national epic of Portugal, a poem that does something no other on our list has done quite so explicitly. It takes recent, verifiable history and elevates it to the level of myth, dressing the brutal, arduous voyages of the Age of Discovery in the splendid robes of classical gods and heroes. Composed in the 16th century, just decades after the events it describes, Camões's masterpiece chronicles the voyage of Vasco da Gama and his crew as they became the first Europeans to sail directly from Europe to India by rounding the treacherous Cape of Good Hope. But this is no dry historical account. Camões, a poet and adventurer who himself spent years sailing the very routes he describes, injects the journey with a cosmic significance, framing it as a fated mission for a chosen people, a new Argonautica for a new age of heroes. The poem's very opening lines set this audacious tone, invoking not the muses of Mount Helicon, but the nymphs of the Tagus, the great river of Portugal, and the unknown, nameless spirits of the vast sea, asking them to inspire a song of the great and splendid memory of the kings who enlarged Portugal's domains. The heroes are not Achilles or Aeneas, but Da Gama and his men. Their quest is not for a golden fleece or a fallen city, but for a sea route to the spice-rich lands of the East, a quest driven by an insatiable thirst for honor and a divine mandate to spread Christendom. Yet, to tell this distinctly modern tale, Camões turns to the most ancient of tools, the pantheon of Mount Olympus. The gods themselves are divided over the fate of the Portuguese. In sublime councils held in the marble halls of the heavens, Venus, the goddess of love, champions the Portuguese, seeing in them a new, noble race worthy of her favor and reminiscent of her own beloved Romans. Arrayed against her is Bacchus, the god of wine and revelry, who sees the Portuguese as a dire threat to his own worship and influence in the East. He becomes the story's divine antagonist, a petulant and powerful force who stirs up storms, incites local rulers, and conjures illusions to wreck the Portuguese flotilla at every turn. This celestial drama plays out directly on the human stage, with Venus and her son Cupid descending to aid the weary sailors, while Bacchus disguises himself to whisper poison in the ears of African and Indian kings. This fusion of the classical and the contemporary creates a breathtaking and unique texture. At one moment, we are in the cramped, reeking hold of a carrack with men suffering from scurvy, battling monstrous waves and doubting they will ever see home again. In the next, we are witnessing Venus pleading their case before a sympathetic Jupiter, who assures her that the Portuguese are destined for greatness, their voyages foretold in the very stars. The sea itself is a character, both a physical adversary and a realm of supernatural wonder. The storms that threaten to shatter Da Gama's ships are not merely weather, they are the manifestations of Bacchus's wrath. The giant Adamastor, one of the most powerful inventions in all of literature, rises from the depths off the Cape of Good Hope. He is the spirit of the cape itself, a titan transformed into a craggy headland as punishment for his love of the sea nymph Thetis. He appears to the terrified sailors as a colossal, shadowy figure in the storm clouds, his voice the rumble of thunder, his tears the torrential rain. He prophesies the future disasters that will befall those who dare to challenge his domain, a haunting, tragic figure who embodies the profound terror and the unknown perils that every Portuguese sailor faced when leaving the charted world behind. Camões masterfully weaves the nation's entire history into this single voyage. As the fleet sails along the coast of Africa, Da Gama points out landmarks to the skeptical king of Melland, using the geography as a prompt to recount the glorious deeds of earlier Portuguese heroes. We hear the story of the brave, doomed Inni Circumflex de Castro, the queen murdered for love whose story would haunt the monarchy for generations. We learn of the fierce battle of El Jubarota that secured Portugal's independence from Castile. We witness the conquest of Ceuta in North Africa, the first step in the empire's expansion. This narrative technique, the history within the history, transforms the poem from a simple travelogue into a national biography, justifying the current voyage as the culmination of centuries of struggle and divine favor. It is a breathtaking act of literary patriotism, connecting the daring of Da Gama directly to the valor of the nation's founders. When the fleet finally arrives in Calicut, India, the encounter is not just a commercial meeting, but a clash of civilizations filtered through the lens of epic. Da Gama stands before the Samudrin, the Hindu ruler, and delivers a grand speech explaining who the Portuguese are, where they come from, and what they seek. A moment that captures the sheer audacity of this tiny nation appearing unannounced on the doorstep of a vast and ancient empire. The return voyage is just as perilous, with Bacchus's vengeance pursuing them all the way, but they are safeguarded by Venus, who creates a magical, idyllic island for them to rest upon, the Isle of Love. Here, the sea-weary sailors are greeted by Nereids, and Da Gama is given a prophetic vision of the future by a river nymph, Tethys. She shows him a magnificent celestial machine, a map of the stars that reveals the entire Eastern Hemisphere from Africa to Japan, and she foretells the names and deeds of all the great Portuguese captains and viceroys who will come after him, building a maritime empire that will stretch from Brazil to Macau. This vision serves as the poem's ultimate justification, a divine sanction for the empire that Camões himself witnessed, an empire now in its golden age but already showing signs of the overreach and corruption that would eventually lead to its decline. The Lusíads is thus a poem of its moment, a triumphant, confident roar from a nation at the peak of its power and global influence. Yet, running beneath the celebration is a subtle, melancholy current. Camões, who lost an eye fighting in the very empire he glorifies and who struggled in poverty upon his return, infuses the poem with a profound sense of the cost of this glory, the lives lost at sea, the loneliness of exile, and the moral compromises of conquest. It is an epic that looks both forward and back, using the gods of a dead world to sanctify the deeds of a new one, and in doing so, it erected a permanent monument in verse to the courage, faith, and ruthless ambition that launched Europe into the modern age. And so our journey across continents and through millennia comes to a close, but what an astonishing path we have walked together. From the dusty clay tablets of Gilgamesh's Uruk to the salt-sprayed decks of Portuguese Carax, from the cosmic pyres of Ragnarok to the quiet, heart-wrenching reunion of Odysseus and Penelope, we have witnessed the full, breathtaking spectrum of human imagination. These 25 epic sagas, born in isolation from the frozen Norse fjords to the steamy Mesoamerican rainforests, are not isolated curiosities. They are part of a grand, global conversation, a testament to a shared human spirit that, across time and space, has grappled with the same profound mysteries using the language of myth and magic. It is nothing short of miraculous that a Mesopotamian king's fear of death echoes in the grief of the Norse god Balder, or that the heroic ideal of the Greek Achilles finds its reflection in the Persian Rostam and the Kyrgyz Manas. We see the quest for immortality, whether through the physical plant sought by Gilgamesh, the spiritual grace of the Holy Grail, or the legacy of a city's walls, appear again and again as humanity's defiant answer to its own mortality. We watch the eternal struggle between order and chaos play out on every stage, from the triumph of Zeus over the Titans and the serpent Typhon, to the victory of the hero twins over the lords of Xibalba, to the establishment of the Mandan Kurufaba by Sundiata. These are not just stories, they are the foundational codes of civilizations, the original attempts to impose narrative and meaning onto a vast, unpredictable, and often terrifying universe. They gave our ancestors a framework to understand the changing seasons, the fury of storms, the mystery of death, and the proper way to live in community with one another. They encoded their deepest fears of oblivion, of disorder, of divine wrath, and their most soaring hopes for justice, for legacy, for a love that transcends even the grave. The magic in these tales is never mere decoration. It is the physical manifestation of the unseen forces that shaped their world, from the sung incantations of the Kalevala that could build a boat or calm a storm, to the divine far of the Persian Shahs that legitimized their rule, to the tragic curse upon the ring Anvaranot that illustrated the inescapable nature of fate. These elements were as real and vital to their cultures as the laws of physics are to ours, providing a lens through which to interpret fortune and misfortune, victory and defeat. So as we step back from this tapestry of gods, heroes and monsters, the question is no longer which of these stories is true, but what truth each one holds for us. They are a colossal inheritance, a library of the human soul that reminds us of our capacity for immense courage, profound love, terrible vengeance, and relentless curiosity. They show us that the questions we ask today about our purpose, our duties, and our place in the cosmos are the very same questions that have haunted and inspired humanity since we first gathered around a fire and looked up at the stars. Now we turn this final page over to you. We have sailed with Odysseus, stood with Chulainn at the ford, and witnessed the sorrow of Siegfried and Kriemhild. Among these 25 worlds, which saga echoed most deeply within you? Was it the philosophical depth of the Mahabharata, the raw, tragic heroism of Beowulf, or the wondrous, chaotic adventure of the Monkey King? If you could step through a portal into any one of these mythical landscapes, which would it be? Would you walk the shimmering halls of Camelot, seek wisdom from the All-Father Odin, or witness the divine drama of Osiris and Isis along the banks of the Nile? The conversation does not have to end here. This is a community built on a shared love for these incredible stories. Share your thoughts, your favorite character, or a myth from your own heritage in the comments below. Let's build this into the greatest gathering of mythology enthusiasts on the platform. And if this journey through the sagas of myth and magic ignited your imagination, if you want to ensure you don't miss our next deep dive into the legends that shape our world, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell. Your support allows us to continue unpacking the stories that matter. Thank you for embarking on this epic quest with us.